The sitting is open. Dear colleagues, please take your seats. May I welcome our ambassadors to this sitting. May I welcome you, colleagues. May I welcome all who are watching us online. And may I welcome those who are with us at the public gallery. May I especially welcome Ambassador Tarachuk and Madam Maria Mezentseva in the front row. The reason for this is that we will now welcome to our hemicycle His Excellency, the President of Ukraine, Mr. Volodymyr Zelensky, who will address us via video link. I propose that we have 45 minutes for this debate to have the address of the President and to have our questions. Dear Mr. President, can you hear me? Dear Mr. President, can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Do we have, you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Dear Mr. President, may I thank you that you are able to join us today. We all know how busy your schedule is day after day, and we all admire your courage and determination in these days and months when your country is under brutal and illegal attack by the Russian military. Since the 24th of February, tens of thousands of Ukrainians have been killed and wounded. Millions of your citizens had to leave their homes, many of them even your country, and have now found shelter in our other member states. The pain caused by this brutal war is immeasurable. The courage shown by your people to resist the illegal Russian war of aggression is almost unimaginable. Please, Mr. President, accept our condolences for all those who lost family and friends in this war that should never have been started and should end as soon as possible. And please, Mr. President, accept our best wishes to you and all your citizens who so bravely strive to restore Ukraine's national sovereignty and territorial integrity. This organization, Europe's oldest and broadest treaty-based cooperation for peace in Europe, stands united with you and your people. Mr. President, by crossing your borders, Russia also crossed our red lines, the red lines of this organization, which was founded to protect and promote peace in the whole of Europe on the basis of the respect for the rule of law, human rights and democracy. That, Mr. President, is why the Council of Europe suspended and then expelled Russia from its membership. A unique, sad but unavoidable and necessary reaction to Russia's blatant violation of international law. Mr. President, we all consider Russia's unilateral aggression as an attack against the multilateral cooperation that is meant to protect all our citizens in Europe. That is why we try to do whatever is in our mandate to support your country and your citizens in these most challenging and dangerous times. Today, Mr. President, after your intervention, we will again discuss the consequences of Russia's war of aggression and our means to help your country and your citizens at the best of our ability. Mr. President, we would be grateful if you could tell us where you see additional possibilities to help Ukraine and to halt Russia's aggression and to end this war. Amongst the support we can give is our expertise in how to hold everybody who is involved in this war accountable. Every private, every commander, as well as the President, the government and the Parliament of the aggressor state. It is our obligation, Mr. President, we believe, to help you so that nobody will escape responsibility. We are helping to create a system of international justice in cooperation with many others, including the International Criminal Court and the United Nations. Mr. President, this week's ongoing terrible bombing of your city centers by Russia, which I, together with the chair of the Committee of Ministers and our Secretary General, immediately condemned as another blatant violation of international law, again shows that we should remain united to end this shameful aggression by Russia against your country and to help you and the citizens of Ukraine to prevail. Mr. President, we here in the hemicycle are more than ready to listen to your wisdom and your advice to our members and our member states. Mr. President, without further delay, I give you the floor. And thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your support and for such kind, profound words that I understand very well, which are so important. The messages, the actions that I hear from you, dear Mr. President, dear Ms. Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, present there, dear Europeans, I'm very grateful to you for this possibility to talk to you today. These days, Ukraine wakes up every morning with two questions. What else has become the target of the Russian terror in the previous night? And where else our forces were able to prevail over the terrorists? And when I say these days, I don't mean just 2 days or a week, not even a month. The Russian terrorist war against Ukraine has been going on for 232 days. And that's after 8 years of war in Donbass. I think you're well informed about what Ukrainians have to live through these days, because in the European media there is no shortage of information about specific manifestations of the Russian terror and about the course of this war. The Ukrainian delegation at the Parliamentary Assembly is working quite effectively, stressing what is important for Ukraine and for all of Europe. So I won't take your time to tell you about the new targets of the Russian terrorists and the events at the front line. I want to focus on something else, on how and when we will be able to put an end to these days, when the war will end, when peace will come, when our territorial integrity, peace and quiet will come back to the Ukrainian land. I remember when I became president of Ukraine in 2019, our country had quite difficult relations with the Council of Europe, because then the Russian delegation had come to the Parliamentary Assembly. In fact, it was an attempt to forget everything that Russia had done against Ukraine and European values starting with 2014. Forget it by covering it with the ideas that allegedly one had to keep up the dialogue with Russia on all possible levels. Then the word dialogue camouflaged the desire to just ignore the reality. And even worse, that word camouflaged the desire of some actors to get a part of the corrupt money flow from Russia to Europe that had already caused many troubles in the European politics. This year, there is nothing like that any longer, and I'm really grateful to you for that, really grateful. When Russia started its full-fledged invasion, you quickly adopted a very principled decision and you expelled the aggressor state from the Council of Europe. You adopted a number of resolutions that condemned the Russian terror and the crimes of that country against international law. The principal approach is what we can see on all the other levels of the European institutions. But what does it all mean in essence? It shows that finally a real dialogue has started, a fair dialogue, the dialogue we need so much. And it's just not just the word dialogue that camouflages something, but a real search for solutions. It's a dialogue between Europeans, dialogue about how we should save people's lives, how we should protect our joint values and how Europe should withstand when they're attacking everything which is fundamental for peace. And when this attack is carried out not by a marginal political group, which we had seen in Europe before, but when the attack is carried out by geographically the largest country of the world, the country that for decades had prepared itself for the war and that turned it into its ideology, the destruction of human rights. And now we see some historically important results of this dialogue in Europe between the Europeans. We see the actions that have made Europe unprecedentedly stronger. Never yet in the history united Europe was so strong as it is today, so focused on everything that is needed to not allow the Russian terrorists destroy our lives. This is the power of dialogue. Together, we are isolating Russia. Together, we're punishing it for the terror and making it feel the price of the war it has unleashed. Thanks to our dialogue, we have very important programs of support for Ukraine, defense programs, financial support, the programs to support Ukrainians, the ones who had to flee their homeland to save themselves from hostilities. Thanks to this dialogue, a lot has been done to protect Europe from the Russian energy weapons. What had been called for decades had become a priority for the national governments, for the European institutions. And we have to continue this kind of dialogue, the dialogue between us, the dialogue with our partners all over the world. And I will ask you on all the levels in politics and media, as you talk to your voters, to promote the idea of delivering to Ukraine a proper number of modern air defense and anti-missile systems. This year, we already have to defend, to protect our skies from Russian terror. If this is done, this will be a fundamental step to bring the war to an end in the nearest future. We have to continue this dialogue to cut down further Russia's possibilities to finance this war. In particular, it is crucial to take away the profits from oil and gas exports from the aggressor state. Russia should see zeroed accounts to think about the benefits of peace. This is what the sense of the sanction packages of the EU should be. We have to continue this dialogue to finally find a way to force Russia to comply with the requirements of the IAEA and of all the humanity. In other words, to demilitarize Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Russia should not only take all its military equipment from there, but to take all of its soldiers from there. We have to continue this dialogue. So to make Russia responsible as the aggressor state and every Russian murderer and butcher for all the crimes in this war, for every manifestation of their terror. When these legal mechanisms are created, when they start working, this will become one of the most powerful guarantees for long-term peace. Ladies and gentlemen, dear Europeans, this year we have seen that Russia is rejecting any real dialogue with us. Russia only wants to speak with the language of terror, and this is a fact. This fact should be recognized at every level, politically, legally, and at the front line in Ukraine by supporting our defense capabilities. And I want to thank you because PACE can become the first international organization that will recognize Russia as the terrorist state. But we have seen the power of a real dialogue between us, the dialogue about how terror can be stopped. As a result, Europe is much stronger now, as anyone could have thought, and potentially our possibility to protect freedom, rule of law, human rights, and social justice is even stronger than we can think about it today. Europe can play a historic role in creating a special tribunal for Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Let's do it. It will be the best way to protect the principles of international law. Europe can become a leader in all the efforts to pay back the losses created by the war. We have to create a proper compensation mechanism. And we have some ideas about how to create it. A draft like that, a project has already been prepared by Ukraine, and I will ask you to support it in Europe and on the level of the UN General Assembly, especially because it is in Europe when the lion's share of the Russian assets are concentrated, of the state as such, of the corrupt businesses that are related to the aggressor state. The Russian assets should go into compensation of all the losses caused by the war. Now, if we really think about it, each of you would know very well what are the elements of this peace formula. You all hear what this dialogue in Ukraine and in Europe is about and in the world to stop this war, to bring peace back. Ukraine has proposed its road toward peace. It's a European road. It's a road of dialogue and of principled decisions, a dialogue, a way of implementing the decisions to protect Ukraine, humanity, to keep increasing the price for the aggressor, for the war. The road of making all those who are responsible for the war to respond for it. This is the road toward victory. It's much shorter than it may seem, but only on condition that the dialogue for it is fair between all of us who really cherish freedom, and that the word dialogue does not cover the wish to ignore the war. I want to thank you for your attention. Thank you for your great support. Long live Europe, and glory to Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I think that the applause you just received shows how much we appreciate, as said, your courage, your determination, but also your wise words and the wisdom that you shared with us, how to come as soon as possible to an end of this war and to restore justice, national sovereignty and territorial integrity of your country. Mr. President, you have told us that you have to leave at about 10:45 because your schedule is heavy, and you have accepted to answer questions of our delegates, and you answer them one by one. We first have 5 questions on behalf of the political groups and then members of national delegations. First, for the first question, I call Mr. Frank Schwabe. He is from Germany, and he speaks on behalf of the group of the Socialists, Democrats and Greens. Frank, you have 30 seconds.
Dear Mr. President Zelensky, thank you so much for this very impressive speech in a time where you are sometimes speechless, and thank you for your very impressive leadership. Our group as Socialists, Social Democrats, Democrats and Greens tries to support the brave people of Ukraine in this terrible Russian war, like we try to do it together as a unified organization here as much as possible. I would like to ask you about the prisoners of war and the Ukrainians, those Ukrainians who were deported to Russia. What do you expect from the international community? What do you expect from us in this regard? Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Frank. Mr. President.
Glory to the heroes. Thank you for your question. The question of prisoners of war is very relevant, like any other humanitarian issue, especially as we see what the Russian forces, how they treat our prisoners of war. We saw that in Olenivka, where the 50 POWs were just blown up. It's not happening according to the rules of the war in terms of the attitude to them. And here the main issue is whether the Red Cross would have access to the POWs. And I would like to turn to you and to turn to the representatives of the managers of the Red Cross, International Red Cross. Yes, this international organization has been working like that all those years. They have to have access to the prisoners. And this has been going on since the occupation of our Crimea and Donbass. They did not have access to our prisoners. The Red Cross cannot get there. It has been going on for 7 years now. And now when there are thousands of our prisoners of war after this full-scale invasion who are in the occupied parts of Donbass, where they are tortured, and we know that. They are tortured. They're doing all kinds of terrible things to them. And once again, they don't have access to them. We Ukrainians cannot fight to make the International Red Cross to find this possibility. It's the Red Cross should fight for it because it's their job, because they are paid for it, because all of the world is watching them. They have to exert pressure upon Russia to get there. This is what I believe is important. Frankly, probably they're trying to do that, but every day we do not hear it from the media that the Red Cross has gone there, that they were at the borders from the Ukrainian side, that they would not be allowed inside. I don't see them at the borders, at those temporary borders. I don't see in the media their speeches, the pressure upon Russia. I don't see them speaking at the UN General Assembly. I don't see this media and information coverage and this pressure. This is what my assessment is. Yes, we are exchanging people. I'm very grateful to the United Nations, to the Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, and I want also to thank our colleagues from Turkey who have helped us liberate some of our defenders from Azovstal plant. I want to thank our partners from Saudi Arabia who have helped us set free some of the prisoners of war, some citizens of the US, Britain, Sweden, Croatia. I think we should all do that. But once again, let me emphasize, I believe that the Red Cross should be more powerful than that.
Mr. President, next question comes from Mr. Alexander Pojcie. He's from Poland and he speaks on behalf of the European People's Party. Alexander, 30 seconds.
Dear President Zelensky, in the name of the European People's Party family, where is the biggest Ukrainian representation, and personally as a Polish senator, I welcome you among us and I wish you and your people all the best. And I promise to carry on your message to our national parliaments. And here's the question. We have no weapon, we have no money. We have international recognition and experience in the field of human rights. How can we help you more than we already helped? What you expect from us to do? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexander. Mr. President.
Thank you for this question. First of all, you need to isolate diplomatically the Russian Federation as much as possible so that the Russian people would know that they're paying a high price for this aggression, so that the society would start exerting pressure upon its leaders, political and military leaders. That's why maximum sanctions, what you can do today, we've said it today, very important political statements, recognition of Russia as the aggressor state, as the state that sponsors terrorism, because the president said at the very beginning, and I wrote it down, in order to create a system of international justice. And this is what we should do. And I think that everything that can enhance the system of international justice, we all have to work for it. Just like we're working with the International Criminal Court today, headed by Prosecutor Han, they come to us, and all the countries are supporting that. The Baltic countries, the Polish, French, Slovakian colleagues, they're coming over here and they're working as prosecutors, as criminal experts. And I think that's the most important thing. The important thing is that the society of the Russian Federation would understand that since now they are a society of the terrorist state, and the borders of European countries would not be open for them, since now they cannot support the war and go to vacation to Europe. They cannot say that we're fighting against our values. We have values of our own. They're talking about themselves. Well, okay, if they have values of their own, why are they enjoying the values of other countries? This is, I think, what we can do. The most important thing is this huge political and information support of Ukraine today. Today, you can do all that. Why? Because the world will feel this war fatigue of any war. The world can get tired of that, but we cannot get tired, because then the world will lose. Not only Ukraine will lose, the world will lose. It loses freedom, democratic future. So in order not to feel this fatigue, you have to support Ukraine. Thank you.
Mr. President, next question comes from Mr. Ian Little-Granger. He is from the United Kingdom, and he speaks on behalf of the European Conservatives. Ian, you have 30 seconds.
Mr. President, can I thank you for allowing your MPs to come here? They're a credit to Ukraine and they're a credit to your parliament. I will tell you, this is the only group that stood against the Russians, my group. Unlike the President and the leader of the Socialist group, we stood solid. But I ask you this. Start denouncing the countries that won't help you. Countries like Germany and others who are refusing you to give you the tools that you need to win this war. Stand up with us and we'll work and win together.
Thank you, Ian. Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Well, I don't understand what the question to me is. I am grateful to you for your powerful position. I'm really very grateful to you for that. You know, the powerful countries that could help us more, this history of those countries started back in 2014, but today I have to say that Germany, for example, Germany has started helping Ukraine much more. And I very much hope that the manufacturers of air defense systems and we, of course, should think about relations with such countries. There are only 5 countries in the world today that produce such modern air defense systems, and Germany is one of them. And that's why I am grateful that the first air defense systems and anti-missile systems have arrived from Germany. They arrived yesterday. Yes, that would not cover all of our skies. It would not protect us against those 130 strikes that we received 2 days ago and that continue now. This will not defend us completely, but that's already a start, that they're opening up this possibility that in the future Germany will be able to give us more support. And other countries that produce air defense and anti-missile systems can help us protect the skies over peaceful Ukrainians.
Mr. President, next question comes from Mr. Julian Bulai. He's from Romania, and he speaks on behalf of the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats in Europe. You have 30 seconds, Julian.
President Zelensky, thank you for accepting the invitation to be present in this assembly. We praise the courage of the Ukrainian people. We salute the work done by the Ukrainian colleagues in this House. Our ALDE group joins the calls to ensure a comprehensive system of accountability for serious violation of international law by Russian Federation. What role can Council of Europe play in the establishment of a special tribunal for the crimes of aggression against Ukraine? Slava Ukraini!
Thank you, Julian. Mr. President.
We definitely need to support our resolution at the UN and to establish the special tribunal. This is one resolution. And again, we're getting back to the system of international justice. It would be just to bring all those culpable for responsibility. And another thing where we could work together is to support yet another resolution in terms of establishing a mechanism of compensation for the losses. These are the 2 things that will be discussed in the coming days and weeks, and these are of principal importance for us. Why? Because, well, it's difficult to say in general what can be done, but let me give you some very specific example. I came to one of small towns in the Kharkiv region that had been recently deoccupied, and when you see people who have lost their sons, the son who had been on the front line, and you would ask his parents, with white hair, with grief in their eyes, you would ask them, what do you need? They don't need anything. They don't need any food. They don't need any water. They don't need any money. They want to rebuild their house that had been robbed and destroyed by themselves. They're only asking for justice. Find those who are guilty of this war. They have to be held responsible. So creating the special tribunal and bringing all of them to justice is what's so important for us today, even for simple Ukrainians. Thank you.
Mr. President, and last question on behalf of the political groups from Mr. George Katrougalis. He's from Greece, and he speaks on behalf of the Unified European Left. George, you have 30 seconds.
Mr. President, on behalf of the European Left, I welcome you and I wish you luck and strength in all your efforts for defending your country. I'd like to ask you, what do you think that it is the role of diplomacy, if any, for ending the Russian aggression and putting an end to the war?
Thank you, George. Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Diplomacy is a most powerful tool when weapons are not talking. Diplomacy today, diplomacy with Russia, we cannot have it today. We cannot have it the kind of diplomacy we used to have before, because there is no respect to the leaders who are killing, who are not respecting international law. It cannot happen so that someone would isolate the leading European countries and the world would support territorial integrity of Ukraine, but some countries continue talking as if nothing is happening. That is why I believe that today the diplomatic isolation of Russia is an important kind of pressure. We're not terrorists. You are not shooting at the usual nationals of the Russian Federation, but we have to show them their place. We have to isolate them. They all have to understand that this war costs. This war is happening in Ukraine because of the leaders that they have elected. I think that diplomacy is specific. It cannot be selective. This is a subject we're discussing. This is what we're not discussing. If it is good, we will discuss it with Russia. If it's not very nice, we will not discuss it with Russia. No, it cannot happen like that. Russia should bear responsibility for what it is doing, for what it has already done, for having blocked the sea, for having brought famine to many countries of the world, for having taken over the nuclear power plant, for bringing cold weather, not only to us. We have exported electric power to the countries of the European Union. Not only to the European Union, but to Moldova, we were exporting to Romania. We were going to start exporting it to Poland, but Russia took away Zaporizhzhia power plant and they turned it off to bring grief, to bring trouble, any trouble and grief that can be caused by shortage. So diplomacy should be about stopping Russia, bringing back our territorial integrity so that they move back to their own territory.
Thank you, Mr. President. We now will continue with questions from members. Prochain orateur est Monsieur.
The first question from Mr. Alain Milon from France.
Milon from France. You have 30 seconds, Alain.
Merci.
Thank you, President. Ukraine has been subject to intense bombardment, and this has resulted in the death of many civilians who are deliberately targeted. For instance, what happened around Mariupol was one example of that, and I was able to visit that myself with the President of the French Senate. My question then is about the health and humanitarian situation. Do your hospitals have the capacity they need to deal with the destruction caused by this war? What kind of medical support might you need?
Alain, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you, the French Republic, since the beginning of the war, because children with oncological diseases, France has helped us to treat them. This is true. We have quite good health care infrastructure. When we had to fight COVID, we had quite good results, but with the beginning of this full-fledged war, well, of course, we're always short of something because there are many wounded people, and that is why any kind of assistance is what we very much welcome. And here we can speak about details because we need everything. There are special hospitals that are deployed in the deoccupied areas. There are special mobile hospitals that would be brought to the front line. We also need support for a rehabilitation program. So there is room to help us. And if you want to do it, we would be grateful for it.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next question comes from Madam Fiona O'Loughlin. She's from Ireland. Fiona, you have 30 seconds.
President Zelensky, solidarity with you and the people of Ukraine from the people of Ireland. First of all, I would like to pay tribute to the female battalion who have represented Ukraine here in PACE and indeed all around Europe. They have been incredible ambassadors. You talk, President Zelensky, about a unified Europe supporting Ukraine, and you are right, but in many ways Europe is at a crossroads. And here in PACE we believe that there is a need for a fourth summit to reconfirm and recommit to the guardianship of human rights, the rule of law and democracy. And of course, such a summit would absolutely commit to supporting Ukraine and holding Russia responsible and accountable for the war of aggression and their crimes against human rights. What other themes do you feel that we should prioritise in a fourth summit to prevent such a situation happening again? Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Mr. President.
I think that there are answers in your question that one can speak about in details and talk about them for hours on end. Human rights, the right to freedom, the right to life, these are the rights, are what we're fighting for and what we are giving our lives for. And I think that these are the subjects you have discussed at the summit, at any summit. I think the most important thing is to make decisions. The decisions that depend on you, but the motivation to unite Europe depends on your decisions as well as motivation for us in Ukraine to defend ourselves and not all our land, but to defend all those values, rights and freedoms of people all over Europe, of the societies of all of the world. This is very important for us. That's why the decisions, such as recognition of Russia as the terrorist state, these are not just words. That's a public recognition. That's not just a policy. That gives us a lot of motivation. You know what is happening here, and you know what we're fighting for. The same kind of results should bring us is what we should hear at any summit, or else that would be just a dialogue and just the word dialogue. Any dialogue should end up with results. That's what I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next question comes from Mr. John Howell, and he's from the United Kingdom. John, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Let me start by also praising the Ukrainian delegation to PACE. They are a real credit to you. You have long asked for air defense systems to be able to cover Ukraine. I'm pleased to see that NATO is now moving forward with that. Are you pleased with the progress that is being made, or do you still want more help in this area?
Thank you, John. Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Now, as regards air defense, we have our own air defense systems, but we do not have enough of it. We're fighting a big country, territorial, a big, large country that has a lot of equipment and lots of missiles. You would see what we're fighting. not so bad. 130 strikes of cruise missiles during 2 days. The use of dozens of drones, kamikaze drones, Shahid Iranian drones, and other drones. This night alone, 9 drones were hit by us. Yesterday, more than 30 were destroyed. And that's a constant fight. Well, of course, it takes our strength away and our equipment away. And there we would like to have a better possibility to cover up our skies. Our own capabilities are not enough for us. Germany has given us this possibility now. As I've said, the IRIS-T, the first system has already been delivered. The United States have confirmed their support with new air defense systems. We would very much like the support to be much higher. We expect from France and from Italy powerful steps where they could also help us. And there is nothing I can add about that. We only have about 10% of what we need, frankly speaking.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next question comes from Mr. Emanuelis Singers. He's from Lithuania. Emanuelis, you have 30 seconds.
Sir, it's no words to express our solidarity, especially from the Baltic states. We were never recognized like a part of Soviet Union by international community, and the occupation from Soviet time was not enacted on us. But you made all homeworks related to human rights, and you lead the fight for human rights of our European society. My question will be, after yesterday United Nations vote about bridging the second charter point or paragraph of United Nations Charter, how we should react, and what is our next step in United Nations against Russia, against those terrorist regime, against the clique in Kremlin who is now acting against Europe, nationalist states against liberal democracies? Thank you.
Thank you, Emanuelis. Mr. President.
I believe yesterday we talked to our diplomats. It was a historic day yesterday. 143 countries supported Ukraine. And they did not recognize those bloody annexations and pseudo-referenda, artificial referenda. I think that was a victory not only for Ukraine yesterday, but the victory for the world community. And it's a powerful result. It is powerful, and it has increased compared to the previous time, the number of the countries that now recognize Ukraine and do not recognize the lies that with which Russia keeps attacking the information space all over the world. I think that was a very powerful step and a big loss for the Russian Federation. And with such steps, not only at the front line in combat that the victory is built, but in diplomacy, about which we have already spoken, at the international platforms, at the PACE, at the UN, with these steps, and of course, in combat as well. That's why we need support in all of those areas. And just look, yesterday, only 5 countries that supported Russia, only 5. Almost nobody is left with them. And that shows that the world is united. And we should not lose that. This is our mission.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next question comes from Madam Sunat Eversdottir, and Suna is from Iceland. You have 30 seconds, Suna.
Thank you. Dear Mr. President Zelensky, I had the honor of visiting your beautiful country this summer on a fact-finding mission with the PACE delegation, and I would firstly like to express my strong solidarity for the people of Ukraine. Ensuring accountability and ending impunity for Russian war crimes is a huge but very vital challenge that Ukraine has boldly taken on. I believe it is vital to go above and beyond to ensure that trials for war crimes committed in Ukraine be beyond reproach, so no one can question their fairness or claim any bias by the courts. To this end, Are you and your government considering some form of hybrid trial mechanism, for example, to include international experts in war crimes tribunal in Ukraine? Thank you.
Thank you, Suna. Mr. President.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for having visited Ukraine this summer. Because when we're talking about political support, this is very important, to come and see with your own eyes, to visit not only the capital city, but those areas that have been deoccupied, to see the consequences of what Russia had done. We are an open democracy that is going toward the European Union, and along this road I want to thank you for any support, any help with your support to the candidate status for Ukraine. This has become a very important motivation for all of us, for our armed forces. We know what we're fighting for. We are open. That's why we're ready to work, in any hybrid format. If you have some ideas, some proposals, we are a state that would only support such initiatives. But it's important that all of this would not be just declarations, so it will work, that an international tribunal would be set up. And here the question is not who will play the most important role there and from what countries. The important thing is to have their ambitious people who want to have results, professionals, and I'm sure this is what it's going to look like.
Mr. President, if you allow me, I would have two more questions before we have to finish due to your time restraints. The first question comes from Mr. Damien Cotier. He's from Switzerland. You have the floor.
Thank you, President. I have the honor to lead the delegation of 10 members to this assembly, which, as has just been said, went to Irpin and Abuja at the end of June. On behalf of the assembly, we were all shocked by what we saw, which shows that war crimes were perpetrated and are still being perpetrated. Now, the Assembly committed itself very early towards an international tribunal against these crimes, and the Committee of Ministers joins us. President, could you tell us what specific diplomatic efforts are underway at the moment, a broad coalition towards this? And at the moment, do you receive sufficient means to conduct investigations on the spot? Do you have sufficient investigators to look into these numerous war crimes on your territory? Thank you very much.
Damian, Mr. President.
Thank you. I want to thank you too for having visited Ukraine, Irpin and Bucha. Unfortunately, I have to state that in the deoccupied areas, in the Kharkiv region, the things are as terrible as what you could see in Irpin and Bucha, with hundreds of graves of the people who had been tortured and killed. That's why the issue of this international tribunal, and today it has been brought up many times, is absolutely fair and very relevant. And as regards, well, first of all, we expect that a field office would be opened up in Kyiv of the International Criminal Court. Prosecutor Han is talking to our Prosecutor General, and we hope that this process would be accelerated and so the office would be opened up. And as I said, criminal experts are now working, and all kinds of experts from different countries, and here our doors are also open, because in addition to experts, forensic experts, France has helped us technically a lot so that we could do everything in terms of forensic investigations right on location with proper equipment, modern equipment. So everything is quite simple. We need both experts, and we will never have too many of them. We're open for this process because we know those people who have tortured our people. We are open for the international community. That's why we need both experts and equipment. Frankly, there are too many people who have been killed, too too much work has to be done to dig out the corpses and many other things. So we're grateful for any technical support as well.
Mr. President, now the last question due to time restraints comes from Madam Ingrid Skau, and Ingrid is from Norway. You have 30 seconds, Ingrid.
President Zelensky, thank you for taking time to address our assembly, and it's highly appreciated. As your forces are retaking former occupied territories, the brutality of the Russian forces is being uncovered step by step. Among other things, we have had terrible news about several mass graves with a shockingly high number of dead soldiers and civilians. How are you, in the middle of this war, also able to deal with such challenges? Do you have the resources and capacity to handle these sites of mass graves with the dignity and respect such as complex and demanding task demands, both with regards to the dead and with regards to their families? To what extent do you receive assistance from the international community? Thank you.
Thank you, Ingrid. Mr. President.
Thank you for this question. You know, when we speak about support to our people, that people need to find jobs, children have to go to schools and kindergarten, people have to go back to the houses that have been destroyed. All these things mean usual infrastructure for everyday life of usual people. And when there is no war, you don't pay much attention to it. But now all of it has been destroyed for many people. That's why you need support on location. The local authorities are helping us, the central authorities are helping, and all of our money, frankly, goes to the front line, to our military. That's why we need a lot of money to bring back people's lives, educational infrastructure, which we don't have. So any kind of assistance, any kind of donations or special programs to recover, to rebuild the life of Ukrainians would be very much welcome. Today, we call it a fast recovery plan, which includes recovery of the electric power grid and communication lines after missile strikes and water delivery. You know, all of these are the important priorities, simple things, but that cost very much. The deficit, our budget deficit, is $5 billion every month. So you understand that we're spending the money first and foremost for the armed forces, and first and foremost for the pensioners, for social assistance, to medical doctors and teachers. This is where our money goes today. So all the other things that you have just mentioned, and what I am speaking about, where there's not enough. I don't want to complain. I don't want to beg you for anything. We will take this road. But if it is possible to help us in any way, to help us in those humanitarian areas, we would really be very grateful for that.
Very much, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, as said, due to time restraints of the President and his heavy schedule, I now have to interrupt the list of speakers. I propose that those who did not have the chance to ask a question to President Zelensky take care that their questions are delivered to Ambassador Tarasuk and Madam Zentseva, that they could find out how to get an answer from or via you. And me, myself, I spoke this morning with the Ukrainian delegation, and I'm most willing to come as soon as possible to your country to address these questions and other possibilities of our assembly to come to your help. May I thank you very, very much at the bottom of our heart. We wish you all the strength, all the wisdom, all the courage to continue your important efforts to restore national sovereignty, territorial integrity, and that justice will be done sooner or later to all the citizens of your country. Once again, Mr. President, thank you very much. We wish you well. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your support. Thank you. And goodbye.
Thank you very much. And again, colleagues, sorry that we could not afford more time to this debate, but I want to compliment you for your disciplined approach. I want to compliment the Ukrainian delegation and the Ukrainian ambassador for making this possible. And I want to thank the President for being able to answer so many questions in such short time. And again, the questions that remain, please take care that they come to the ambassador or to the head of the Ukrainian delegation. We'll find a way to get them answered. Dear colleagues, next item of business this morning is a debate under urgent procedure on further escalation in the Russian Federation aggression against Ukraine. You find it in document 15631, presented by Mr. Emanuelis Zingras on behalf of the Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy. In order to finish by 1 a.m., I will interrupt the list of speakers at about 12:35 p.m. to allow time for reply and the vote. Can we have Mr. Zingras here in the front row to present his report? Let us continue with our next debate. As said, this is the debate under urgent procedure on further escalation of the Russian Federation's aggression against Ukraine, presented by Mr. Emanuelis Zingras on behalf of the Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy. In order to finish by 1, I will interrupt the list of speakers at about 12:35 to allow time for the reply of the vote. And I have to tell you, I will be very strict on the time limits in order to allow as many people as possible to participate. I now first call Mr. Zingras, the rapporteur. Emanuelis, you have 7 minutes now and 5 minutes for reply at the end of the debate. You have the floor, Emanuelis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for providing in such good manner previous discussion with President of Ukraine. So, dear colleagues, we have an issue here related to the country, democratic country attacked by a nationalist regime, by a regime linked to terrorism and attacked to take their land. That was said yesterday by United Nations, 143 countries, evening time. The Charter from United Nations, the second paragraph of the Charter is crossed and breached by Russia Federation. And just we have a President of Ukraine who is doing, together with the honorable members of Parliament of Rada, fantastic homeworks in creating democracy, mature democracy. What is our house about? Democracy. During the bombing, Mr. Cox, during the bombing, they are doing their homeworks, they are voting in favor for Istanbul Convention, they're creating law after law based on our key standards of Council of Europe, become candidate country of European Union. So, member of our Council of Europe gremium, member of candidate to be European Union, full-pledged member of United Nations, attacked by the regime who tried to take now their territories, actually declaring 4 regions, including Crimea, from 2014, that is their territory. Cities are bombed. Just Damian spoke, my colleague and chairman of Human Rights Committee of our Parliamentary Assembly, and he spoke about our visit, our parliamentary visit of our Assembly, to see Bucha, to see the other places of mass murder. It's incredible crimes. So, Mr. President, my mother spent 4 years in Nazi camp, and she told me that I never have an idea that we will be coming to the atrocities underway to the level of Second World War created by those terrible fascist regimes like Hitler and Mussolini. And now we have the nationalist regime based on Ruski Mir attacking our values in Ukraine, our heritage in Ukraine, our European cultural heritage in Ukraine. I visited schools where children asking me, where is my mother, where is my father? I visited hospitals who are staying without electricity during the operation time, and I saw hundreds of people without legs and out their hands after bombing. How we can find the words? How we can find the words to describe everything what was yesterday discussed in the United Nations and today discussed in our gremium. I would like to encourage all of you today to be serious. Our amendment, mostly in Political Affairs Committee, and the colleagues can confirm, were adopted. All amendments, mostly 99% of all amendments were adopted unanimously by all parties, and today I'm asking you to be serious and support our resolution. Of course, it's not air defense. We are asking for air defense. It's not concrete air defense. It's not tanks, not weapons. no humanitarian supply, but we are asking every member of parliament in their districts, in their parties, in the 46 countries, to make a link to current Ukraine, to use sister cities between our 46 member states, to make sister cities with Lvov, with Odessa, with Kiev, to use the democracy to democracy approach and organize our societies on the bottom level of democracy, including the internal power of our societies, including the associations, medical associations, the even military associations, to using the brotherhood and supply them with everything what is possible. Governments are doing that on the governmental level. Parliamentarians should ask our nations to do that on personal level. In Lithuania, we just collected one Bayraktar in few days, making on TV announcement. You can do everyone to collect money in your societies for hospitals and warm clothes. The winter is coming. And we will not give, Mr. Cox, the possibility for European countries to change the topic. If energy will be the topic, we will not change the topic of Ukraine to energy. If food will be the topic, we will not overcome with the food topic of Ukraine. Well, that is the major point of the Second World War for Russia, who is a terrorist state and regime is terrorist, to attacking our values, and Ukrainians are dying for the standards of human rights of Council of Europe. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Emmanuel, for your presentation. And as said at the end, you have 5 minutes to answer to remarks. Now, in the debate, I first call Madam Yevgenia Kravchuk from Ukraine, and Yevgenia speaks on behalf of the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats in Europe. You have the floor, Yevgenia.
Mr. President, dear Rapporteur, Mr. Zingeris, I'm delighted to open this debate, especially after such powerful intervention of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky for the first time speaking in this assembly. ALDE Group, of course, will be supporting this resolution, and the wording is strong, and I thank also to political committee that made this wording even stronger, so I urge you to support also the amendments that were carried by the political committee today at the meeting. And of course, the issues addressed in these resolutions are very important. It's about the illegal so-called referenda, we call it null and void. It's about the illegal annexation that Russia tries again to achieve with 4 Ukrainian regions. Of course, no civilized country will support it. And it's about, again, calling to speed up the establishment of international tribunal to bring the perpetrators and to have this crime of aggression in the tribunal as it was during Nuremberg process. But let me address you, not just a member of PACE, not just a member of parliament, but also as a mother of 8-year-old daughter, which is, again, this week not in school, but in the basement, writing me messages when I stay here and talk to you, writing me messages that, Ukraine is again under attack, regions, missiles, drones. Our 8-year-old children know the names of different drones that come to Ukraine, and they differ different types of missile in their own age. And there are a lot of popular questions asked in Ukraine. For example, how was your night? Are you, is everyone alive and safe? And another 12-year-old child in Mykolaiv this night was taken out of the ruined house, again taken to hospital. A girl in Nikopol had 2 legs amputated because of the shelling just a few days ago. Another orphan, 5-year-old boy, became a total orphan because his mom was burnt alive in the car in the center of Kiev this Monday. She was a children's doctor and she was going to school and she was going to work and she didn't survive. But, you know, another popular question is how many more villages did we liberate today? And, you know, no illegal referenda can stop our army of liberating these villages in any, you know, region of Ukraine, and they will be doing so. But of course, Ukraine should get a needed support, help, including modern air defense systems to protect our people. This support will not, of course, bring back the people who are already dead, but it will help to protect more people in Ukraine and to protect democracy in whole Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Evgenia. Next contribution comes from Mr. George Katrougalos from Greece, and George speaks on behalf of the Unified European Left. You have the floor, George.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. From the first moment, all of us in unanimity, we have been committed to the defense of both Ukraine and its sovereign rights and in defense of the international legality. And we should continue to act like that. In this vein, we fully support the report. However, now we're facing important questions regarding diplomacy. I have full respect for President Zelensky, but if I understood correct what he has said, what he has answered to my question, I cannot agree with him that when the arms speak, there is no room for diplomacy. Truth is that European diplomacy has failed and failed miserably. Not only we were not able to deter Russia from invading, we have been unable in the past to create a new architecture of security that would guarantee the sovereign rights of all countries without detriment to their feelings of threat or security. Still, we have the obligation now, a double obligation, in my understanding, to end the war, of course, in fully respecting the sovereign rights of Ukraine. And second, to avoid the return to a polarized world in which the Cold War of the past would be a much better model, exactly because we lack now the channels of communications that existed at this time. Therefore, I believe that calling Russia a terrorist state, which is intended, again as I have understood it, to exclude any kind of diplomatic channels between the European states and Russia is not, according to my opinion, a good option. If we could have done that in the past, an agreement such as the one concluded between Russia and Ukraine with the mediation of Turkey regarding the transportation of the Ukrainian seeds would not be possible. I strongly believe in peace. I believe that the message of Pope Francis that calls on all European states to have access to diplomacy should be served also by our Assembly. And I am quite sure that this would guarantee also, ultimately, the interests and the sovereign rights of Ukraine.
Thank you, George. Now I call on debate Mr. Indrek Saar from Estonia, and he speaks on behalf of the group of Socialists, Democrats and Greens. Indrek?
Mr. President, dear colleagues, on behalf of Socialist Democrats and Greens group, I would like to start by thanking Emanuelis for raising this urgent topic and preparing the report. Our common values leave no one in doubt that there is nothing more urgent at the moment than stopping the brutalities of Russia's terrorist regime. We are duty-bound to do our utmost to stop Putin's war machine. Sadly, Russia has again proved and keeps proving day by day and hour by hour that the dialogue we use in the civilized world is not a tool they value. This forces us to defend the rule-based world order with other means and do everything in our power to make Putin lose this war. This is the only way left to achieve peace. Only then is there hope that Russia would finally understand that violence is not the solution. We must not refuse any plea for help from Ukraine, whose sole aim is to defend its people and territory. These are our people. That is our territory. All the resources that are ours to give must be given to Ukraine. And in this case, weapons can only be stopped by other weapons. The biggest surprise for Putin, besides the bravery of the Ukrainian people, is the European solidarity. We must keep it up if we want our treasured rule-based world order to prevail, and we must not get caught in traps. One of these has already been set up: immediate ceasefire at any price. That is a road to hell which is paved with good intentions. The ceasefire would offer welcome relief to Putin because he could announce new conquered territories to his supporters on the current front line. It would also give his military industry time to produce new weapons of death and allow to regroup the tattered lines of his army for new attacks. All this while enjoying the fruits of his energy war in European homes and waiting for the political results, and certainly interfering in the elections of other countries in his own inimitable way. This is why I invite all of us not to give in to the temptation to begin peace negotiations if the terms are not acceptable. Peace can only come on the terms of the Ukrainian people. Only if the peace treaty fully respects the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine in the internationally recognized borders, addresses the issues of reparations, deputies to Russia, rebuilding of Ukraine, prisoners of war, and prosecution for the crime of aggression and war crimes. The day before yesterday, I had the opportunity to meet the spouse and the sister of Azovstal fighters. They have been living for months in a state of not knowing and being desperately worried because they have had no news of the husband and the brother who were taken prisoner by the Russians. The extent of their worry is indescribable. And I found it difficult to console them because we have all seen how inhumanely Russia has acted. But I hope, together with them and with the thousands of Ukrainians in the same situation, that the fall of the Russian regime will help their loved ones return home one day. I asked these brave women at the end of our meeting what would be their message to those who think that Ukraine should resign itself to yielding a part of its territory for the sake of the ceasefire. The answer was crystal clear: that is not going to happen. This is a clear guideline for us as well. Ukraine must win this war, Russia must lose. No other solution is possible. Let us engrave this woe into the report in front of us. Long live the world. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Indrek. Please, colleagues, stick to the time that is given. Otherwise, some other colleagues will not have the chance to address us. Next in the debate, I call Madam Ingjerd Schou from Norway. She speaks on behalf of the European People's Party. Ingjerd.
Thank you, President, and colleagues and dear Ukrainian colleagues. Yet again, we have seen an escalation in the war, and yet again, civilians are being targeted. Yet again, the suffering of the Ukrainian people is immense. This morning's call for support by President Zelensky is profound. As fellow Europeans, we cannot stand idly by. The ongoing war is a challenge to global governance and rules-based multinational cooperation, a system which has served us so well in Europe. Only through multilateral work and unanimity can we counter the ongoing threat to our values and way of life. On behalf of the EPP Group, therefore, I urge you all to vote in favor of the draft resolution. We must be unanimous in our clear message to President Putin and his regime. Their targeting of civilian infrastructure and civilian is nothing but terror. We must remain firm in our support of Ukraine and united in our protection of human rights, the rule of law and democratic stability in our continent. We must send a clear message of our resolve to prosecute Russia's crime of aggression against Ukraine, and we will continue our efforts to establish an ad hoc special international tribunal. The tribunal must be set up so that trials can be held as soon as it's possible to bring in the aggressors. Impunity for the Russian leadership cannot be tolerated. The same goes for those responsible for war crimes. They will be prosecuted. Ukraine will need our support for a long time to come, and the EPP group is in favor of setting up an international compensation mechanism as proposed in the resolution. But we must also step up immediate support for the Ukrainian people. From Norway, we are increasing our military support, and NATO has asked all member states to do the same. Humanitarian aid must also be extended. Colleagues, as some have emphasized this week, now is the time for the Council of Europe to come together and rise to the occasion. Now is the time to stand firm on our core values, and now is the time to fight for the very principles on which our organization was founded to protect. A democratic Europe built on a rule-based multinational cooperation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Inga. Now I call on the debate Mr. Alexei Goncharenko from Ukraine, and Alexei speaks on behalf of the European Conservatives Group. You have the floor, Alexei.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Rapporteur, my friend Emanuele Zingiris, for great work. And this is a very powerful report. Together with amendments which were today supported by the political committee, we are saying about tribunal for justice. We are saying finally about air defense weaponry to Ukraine to save our civilians. We are saying about, we are designating Russian regime as a terrorist regime, which is absolutely true. We are saying for the first time on such level that Russia, without any legal grounds, is taking place in the Security Council of United Nations and is abusing this. So this is really very important and very powerful report, and I ask all of us to support it. But I want us to make a step forward and to watch and to see the wider picture. Because yesterday, several days ago, Josep Borrell addressed European ambassadors, and he said several very important things. That the prosperity of Europe was based on cheap Russian energy and Chinese market. And that is true. And this dependence became critical, and we cannot live anymore in these conditions. And we should be strong enough ourselves that the best energy is our own energy, that clean energy is the energy from the countries with clean governments, and nothing else works. And markets which we need are the markets with the rule of law. Also, Borrell said that we delegated our security to United States. Yes, United States is a great ally of Europe and is a great partner. But why Europe should just rely on the United States? It's even not just and fair. We should be strong enough ourselves. Watch at this. We are saying great powers, superpowers. It is United States, it is China. Russia tried to be superpower, but the only super they have, super ego of their emperor. Because we saw how their soldiers were stealing blenders and toilets from Ukraine, because they have never seen it in their towns and villages. So this is really that moment when Europe should become a superpower. We should become a superpower. Council of Europe, we together have more than 600 million population, the strongest economies. What we are lacking of? We have unique culture of consensus, cooperation, dialogue. Let's use all of it. Let's flourish together. Let's really make a great Europe with great force. Ukrainian army can be a very strong part of it. Polish army, German army, French Air Force, British Navy. We will watch it out of the countries. Yesterday, Albanian Prime Minister said, we are a small nation. I want to disagree with him. Albanians, Ukrainians, all are the nations here. We all are great nations. And all together, we can build a great European civilization which will take place on the planet and which will give a model and example to everybody. Let's do it together.
Thank you, Alexei. Now I call in the debate Madam Lise Christoffersen from Norway. Lise, you have the floor.
Dear President, dear colleagues, as we speak, the immediate result of Russia's illegal and brutal war against Ukraine is unfolding before us. The extensive sufferings of the Ukrainian people in a country laid in ruins will forever stand as the most terrible consequence of the Russian aggression against a neighboring country. In addition, Putin's war has turned almost everything upside down. For several years, he has done the utmost to destabilize other European countries, interfering with electoral processes, hacker attacks on public institutions, enterprises, and infrastructure, financing hooligan gangs to disturb public peace and order, to mention some. Europe is now facing energy crisis with extreme prices and supply uncertainty. Norway suddenly became Europe's most important supplier of gas. Sabotage in the Baltic Sea and unidentified drone activity in the North Sea demonstrate our vulnerability. The security situation in Europe has changed dramatically. We need to strengthen our national defense and preparedness, and at the same time supply Ukraine with necessary weapons and equipment. Simultaneously, prices and interests are rising, threatening the welfare of ordinary households. Nor can we afford to ignore the enormous famine disaster brewing in country by country outside Europe, caused by the pandemic, climate change, and Putin's war. Putin's war places great demand on all of us. We must stay together. We cannot let Putin succeed in his attempts to destabilize Europe. Without the necessary solidarity now with Ukraine, with Russian dissidents, with each other, with the rest of the world, we risk never being able to hold Putin accountable for his crimes against humanity. The values of the Council of Europe are needed more than ever. And when this tragic war is over, hopefully sooner than later, Putin and his accomplices, as well as other war criminals, will be held accountable. When that time comes, we must make sure that war settlement is made on the solid foundation on our common values: democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Now I call on the debate Madam Maria Mazantseva from Ukraine. Maria, you have the floor.
Dank u wel, dear President. Thank you very much. Colleagues, I've been in different European institutions for more than 13 years. And today in the morning, I have realized that there is a very clear metaphor describing us today. We are like a phoenix which rises from the ashes. We are becoming more and more powerful with every resolution. United Nations, other international organizations are looking at our decisions. Since the 15th of March, when we show the red card for the Russian Federation for the mother crime of aggression, which is also stipulated in our suggestions for actions as establishing an international tribunal, we are putting a clear signal which path to follow, a path where impunity has no place to exist. We have been debating closing the sky, and this Monday, colleagues, after numerous terrorist attacks on more than 20 cities and towns of Ukraine, we have realized that this is a needed action, confirmed in the President Zelensky's speech this morning. The amendment which exists as a moderated one in the text of this resolution with Mr. Zengiris's support is something incredible to imagine back in the days. Yes, we call the member states to support us in military sense because, colleagues, the European Charter on Human Rights has to deliver at least the right to life. The right to life is deprived from millions of Ukrainians today, and without military support, which is a defensive measures, we cannot provide it. Colleagues, hundreds of prisoners of war are now awaiting for the exchange. This very resolution proposes missions from our very assembly, like those missions you have conducted to Kharkiv, to Izium, to Bucha, to Irpin, to Kiev, to Lviv. You have been to Ukraine so many times since March. You have been with us in the constituencies, delivering medical aid, humanitarian aid, evacuating people. Most of them are women and children, and the Migration Committee, which I belong to, also responded very adequately with already 4 resolutions, which are talking not only about Ukrainians and temporarily relocated persons whom you are hosting, there are most of 7 million of those, but also those countries who have been hosting refugees since very famous crisis. Colleagues, I am very sure that we pave a way for many to act today. I am very sorry that yesterday's in the media, the United Nations resolution was a blast. Well, today's resolution of the pace will be a more blast and a more concrete suggestions of what we can do. Slava Ukraini. Thank you, dear President.
Thank you, Maria. Now in the debate, I call Mr. Dmitry Nataluka from Ukraine. Dmitry, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear Mr. Chairman. Thank you, dear Zingeris, for a brilliant work I think you have done with this report. I'm sorry to say that at 11 o'clock Strasbourg time, my mother just told me that in a small village 20 kilometers from Kyiv where they live, an Iranian Shahed drone sent by Russia has hit residential buildings again. Now, why is this happening despite today's address, yesterday's resolution by the United Nations, and all other steps that the international community is taking to counter Russia? Because Russia feels that it has impunity. Because in a way, something made them believe that they have a license to kill. And probably that thing is their presence in the UN Security Council. And this is one of the most, I would say, important topics that this report addresses as well, is this very issue. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I argue that we are witnessing one of the biggest swindle in international diplomacy, because Russia has no legal rights to be not just a member of UNSC, but merely a member of United Nations. Did you know that this is, as of today, the only country that has not ratified the UN Charter? Did you know that there has been no voting in the General Assembly at all to admit Russia, and that there is no provision in the United Nations Charter to accept a country without vote if it hasn't been the founding country of the United Nations in the beginning, since the San Francisco conference. So, nevertheless, Russia abuses its voting power. It has used its veto more than 143 times as of April 2022. 143 times. This is more than all other members of the United Nations Security Council in total. So, this is something absolutely incredible, and I ask you to support this report precisely for the reason that we should take this matter forward. We should inspect and investigate the mere legal grounds of Russia's presence in the United Nations and its membership. But not only that, this report touches upon also the responsibility of political parties in Russia. I would like to remind you that every illegal act taken by the Russian Federation, starting from the annexation of Crimea and ending of the introduction of the Russian troops on the territory of Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, has been supported by the Russian State Duma, by the Parliament of Russia, unanimously. Doesn't that mean that all of the MPs who voted in favor of those actions that encroach the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of other countries are also guilty? Doesn't that mean that they share this responsibility and should be recognized as organizations that facilitate terrorism? They should, in my opinion, be definitely recognized so. So I would call strongly to support this report. Thank you again, dear Mr. Zingeris, and Slava Ukraini. Thank you.
Thank you, Dmitry. Now I call in the debate Madam Maria Jofreva-Skuratovsky from Estonia. Maria, you have the floor.
Honored President, members of Assembly, first of all, I would like to express my deepest support to Ukrainian people, those who have lost loved ones, who are injured, and who are bravely fighting for the freedom of Ukraine. On February 2024, the Russian Federation launched a wide-range attack on Ukraine. In March, the PACE indeed responded promptly to Russia's barbaric actions by expelling the aggressor from the organization. However, we are still witnessing atrocities and destruction in Ukraine. We are witnessing people suffering human rights violations and war crimes. We wish it was a nightmare, but it is not. This is our new reality we all live in. With the return of war to the European soil, all of us in Europe must contribute more actively towards bringing peace and justice. We need to address a huge list of new tasks, not only on the financial, humanitarian or military level, but also on the level of ideology and democratic values. Colleagues, we must remember that our purpose is to preserve the world order in accordance with our values, precisely the rule of law, freedoms and respect for human rights. And at this critical time, we must contribute to do everything in our power to support Ukraine in order to bring justice and freedom to the Ukrainian territory and people. Our support must remain unwavering. The Estonian Parliament submitted a draft statement for legislative proceeding condemning the annexation of the territory of Ukraine and declaring the Russian regime a terrorist regime. The draft declares that the ɁՂԻΓ supports the investigations initiated by the International Court of Justice and International Criminal Court to identify the crimes committed on the territory of Ukraine and considers it necessary to prosecute those guilty of crimes of aggression in an international special tribunal. The ₦ღიგ calls on the international community to adopt similar declarations. At the same time, I feel that it is important to make a distinction between Russia's terroristic regime and the Russian citizens who are condemning Putin's regime and actively oppose this. We should not discriminate against people only because of their citizenship. I also see a need to express support to the political prisoners who have been jailed for their opposing views and activities. Vladimir Kara-Murza, who was awarded the Václav Havel Prize, can serve a great example of someone fighting for the free Russia. We need to keep people like him in our field of vision and not to push them away. I thank my Lithuanian colleague Emanuelis Zingeris for his accurate report. To conclude, I would like to stress once again that only by acting united we will be able to defend peace, security, human rights and democracy in the world. I have no doubt that Russian Federation's open aggression against Ukraine will fail and democracy will prevail. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you, Maria. Next in the debate, I call Mr. Mehmet Eker from Turkey. You have the floor, Mehmet.
Thank you, dear President, dear colleagues. I would like to thank the rapporteur for his valuable report at the very outset. Colleagues, Russian aggression to Ukraine, causing not only the killing of innocent peoples, but also cause the global food insecurity. And this, of course, will affect the dependent countries and the poor people of the world. This is a very another side effect of the aggression of Russia. I will elaborate this issue a bit with your permission. We know Ukraine is among the world's top exporters of key grain as well as fertilizers. Russian aggression on Ukraine in February and its blockade of the country's Black Sea ports in the south brought exports to a halt. Since this blockade, countries that are heavily or completely dependent on Ukraine and Russia for agricultural goods have been negatively affected. Furthermore, the World Food Programme report mentioned that over 800 million people worldwide are going hungry, including over 50 million who are on the brink of famine because of the war in that area, because of the aggression. Hopefully, we ease these problems with a grain corridor initiative in which Turkey and the United Nations played a vital role as mediators. The agreement, which established a corridor for grain export from Russia and Ukraine through the Black Sea, has been reached on 22nd July in Istanbul. Member States should support this grain corridor and participate in efforts to extend the deadline of this agreement. Turkey, as the only actor who can establish a dialogue with both sides in the war, pioneered the solution to the food crisis
Turkish diplomatic success to open a grain corridor clearly showed us how important it is to keep the dialogue channels open to achieve positive solutions. However, the grain corridor only covers the agricultural products that is stored from the previous year's harvest. Additionally, the blockade does not only halt the grain export, but it also halted the fertilizer export as well. Russia, along with the Ukraine, is the world's largest exporter of fertilizers. Thus, since the start of the blockade, farmers all around the globe had to reduce the use of fertilizer, and this will cause a decrease in agricultural production globally. That is the very important issue. I thank you very much for your tolerance.
Thank you, Mehmet. And again, please stick to the 3 minutes, because otherwise you take the time of other colleagues. Next in the debate is Mr. Paulo Pisco from Portugal. Paulo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Congratulations to the rapporteur for this much updated report. Dear colleagues, we should address directly from this assembly to Mr. Putin, ask him to stop immediately the war in Ukraine and leave all the territories illegally occupied, including Crimea. All the referendums done since 2014 are an obscene violation of international law. All along these 8 months of war, Mr. Putin didn't achieve any of his objectives, and he will not achieve any, unless he preferred the mutual destruction. But even though, he always be defeated. Mr. Putin, you have been, since the beginning of the invasion, manipulating and lying to your people, saying it was a special military operation. But today, according to some sources, you have in your hands maybe close to 80,000 deaths of your own people. Your military capacities are now weakening faster, and the morale of Russian troops are destroyed. They don't want to fight anymore to feed your imperialistic and deadly fantasy. And now you are calling to death hundreds of thousands of reservists, while hundreds of thousands others are running away from your insane war, even knowing the risks of their escape. NATO, European Union, Council of Europe and other organizations are stronger and united than ever, while your economy is in collapse and your people is suffering and in despair. And because of this, you are forced to use more and more repression to silence the voices protesting against your brutal dictatorship. Mr. Putin, swallow your pride and recognize that your expansionist fantasy is destroying also your country. You wanted to make Russia great again, but instead you are destroying all prospects of future of your country and of your people that in reality you despise. Your regime is falling apart and you are more isolated than ever, internally and externally. Even China is stepping away from you. Stop the barbarism. Respect international law, human rights and sovereignty of nations. Don't turn the world into a jungle with no law nor moral. Killing more and more people, destroying Ukraine and blackmailing the world with food and energy will not give you the victory. On the contrary, it will destroy you faster. You have no way out. You will be judged for your war crimes and crimes against humanity, for the inhuman war you brought with no reason. Justice must be done, and the only place we'll have in history will be in jail. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulo. Next I call on the debate Mr. Jacek Protasevich from Poland. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, dear colleagues. Following an excellent speech delivered this morning to our Assembly by Ukrainian President, Mr. Volodymyr Zelensky, I believe it should be reiterated that Russian aggression against Ukraine, which started almost 8 months ago, is a brutal violation of any international law, including this accepted and signed by the Russian Federation. The only reason it started was imperial ambitions of Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin and the rest of Russian leadership. The war is simply unjustified and extremely bloody. Already thousands of innocent people lost their lives. Many of them were earlier brutally tortured and simply executed. Almost 1/3 of Ukrainian population lost their homes and were forced to leave the country and look for shelters abroad. Recent massive shellings of many Ukrainian cities were targeted precisely to residential areas and civic infrastructure, such as schools, kindergartens, and children playing grounds in parks. All of that is a clear proof that those who are in charge of political and military powers in Russia are ready to use all means to threaten average people of Ukraine, and at the same time, by suggesting possible use of nuclear weapons, want to terrify a broader international public, particularly living here in Europe. That kind of behavior should be loudly and openly defined as terrorist behavior, and that is why I will support an amendment number 7 to the draft resolution, in which our Assembly may call member states of the Council of Europe to declare the Russian Federation a terrorist regime. Finally, I would like to congratulate Mr. Zingeris the idea to organize this debate and to propose the resolution. It is very well tailored to what is currently happening in Ukraine and what we are facing there, both bloody war crimes as well as illegal activities such so-called referendums organized only in order to take over parts of a territory of a sovereign state Ukraine is. And I hope sooner or later all those brutal crimes and illegal activities will be put to trial, and people responsible for them will be prosecuted and properly sentenced by international tribunals. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacek. Now we are going to listen to Mr. Erkin Kadirli from Azerbaijan. Erkin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dear colleagues, it has already been mentioned here that an ad hoc subcommittee this June visited Ukraine. And I myself, as a member of that subcommittee, together with our colleagues, went to Kiev, Bucha, and Irpin. And everything that I saw and heard there was very familiar to me, because it reminded me what had been happening in my country throughout all those 30 years of aggression and occupation. And when the vice mayor of city of Irpin asked me if I had any question, I humbly said no, because I really didn't have any question. Everything was very clear to me. And dear colleagues, aggression always starts under some very good-looking pretext. It could be anything: protection of minorities, restoration of the so-called historical justice, will of people. Might also be some cynical arguments like necessity, and etc. Without almost exception, aggression starts under this pretext. And we now see how it works in Russia, in the case of Russian aggression against Ukraine. Occupation, then fake referendums, then references to will of people, persecution of minorities, and now we have a shameless annexation of part of the Ukrainian territory, which now Russia claims to be part of Russian Federation. And I don't know if you follow the Russian television discussions, what the Russian officials and public figures say that. Now they define the actions of the Ukrainian army, which are completely in compliance with Article 51 of the UN Charter, which is self-defense. They call those actions as aggression against Russian Federation. I mean, this is complete nonsense. Anyway, without taking much further of your time, I would like to thank Mr. Rapporteur, our dear friend Emanuele Zingeris for this report. And I will vote for it, and I'm sure that everyone will do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Erkin. Next in the debate, I call Madam Alexandra Ustinova from Ukraine. You have the floor, Alexandra.
Thank you so much, dear colleagues, and I'm really grateful to the rapporteur for the report that has been presented. And I keep hearing here the questions about diplomacy here, that to what extent we should support Ukraine. And I can tell you that we as Ukrainians always left a space for diplomacy. And we did our first step in the 90s with the Budapest Memorandum when we gave up our nuclear weapons. We did the second step in the 2014 when we gave up partially the territories that were occupied by Russia, and Crimea and Donbass were occupied, and the world was silent. But today, when we have all of these cities bombed, shelled, our children die every day on the street, we will not be silent, and I'm asking you not to be silent. We have to call Russians what they are. We have to call this regime the regime and the terrorist regime, because they're killing our children every day. We are asking in this resolution to support us with the air defense systems. This is a protection for our children so they can go to schools, because thousands of families came back after summer, and now these children are threatened, these children are killed, and they stay in the bomb shelters. We're asking in this resolution to admit that the Russian regime is a terrorist regime, not all the Russians, but the regime that is currently there in Kremlin, telling us that protection of ourselves is a crime and that we are fascists because we are protecting our children. You know, I keep hearing to what extent we should be supporting Ukraine. I can tell you to what extent. To the extent when none of the Ukrainian kids dies just going to school or on the children's play garden. This is the extent for us. To the extent when we get our territories back, because everybody has seen what Russia has done to the Ukrainian population there. And the only reason why they did it is because they were Ukrainians, they spoke Ukrainian, and they wanted to live in their own country. That's why there is no other solution for us but to protect our children, to fight for our territories, and to get our people back. Otherwise, they will continue destroying us. I'm asking everyone today to support this resolution and every amendment, because every word in this resolution means a lot for the Ukrainians. It means a lot for every Ukrainian children. Trust me, there is no family in Ukraine who has not lost someone. A friend of mine and my dear colleague who sits next to me in the parliament lost her husband because he was evacuating people from the occupied territories, and that's actually what the Red Cross had to do. We have every family in Ukraine has lost someone, and every word in this resolution means a lot for us, so please support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Next in the debate, I call Mr. Ahmet Yildiz from Turkey. You have the floor, Ahmed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Certainly, the war in Ukraine, the war of aggression in Ukraine, come to a very critical stage. So we have to discuss it comprehensively. That's why I withdraw the Turkish proposal for current affairs debate on food security to give the rapporteur to focus on the core issue, and he did it very well. When we look at the field, Ukraine continues its successful counteroffensive in regaining their territory rightfully. We should applaud it. But on the other hand, Russia is not backing down. This partial mobilization and hint of nuclear threat is something we should take seriously. I blame this hint of nuclear threat as a person of the region and as a diplomat. It should be deterred in word and in action by our countries, by our leaders. Of course, as President Zelensky said, replied, sometimes bilateral diplomacy is not possible during war, during high sentiments, but during all history of the humanity, we developed other means, by indirect means, by multilateral means, to address some aspects of the conflicts, such as exchange of prisoners of wars, or protecting the health institutions, protecting the food security, cure of wounded people. Turkey, as having the specific role in this region and as having the specific responsibilities which control the Turkish straits, access to the Black Sea, and responsible from the implementation of the Montreux Convention, keeping the balance between the security of the riparian and non-riparian states, had to take some initiatives to this end. As Mr. Eker said, we succeeded in brokering this grain initiative. It means somehow unblocking the Ukrainian ports, giving some important revenues for Ukraine and Ukrainian farmers to sustain the agriculture also for next years, and also to sustain both food security and agriculture for next year, because the grain is not just food, it's also seed to be sowed for the coming period. Till now, it seems that around 7 million tons reached the international markets. And on the other hand, we succeeded in exchange of some prisoners, including 200 Ukrainian and 5 commanders, as we did succeed in Azovstal for releasing of Ukrainians. Turkey will continue to do this. Turkey is also always mentioned by UAVs, but it is not on that, just on that. Turkey developed very structural defense industry relationship with Ukraine.
Please finish,
also on area and the table to support Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Now I call in the debate Madam Anna-Mari Virolainen from Finland. Anna-Mari, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank Mr. Zingeris for a comprehensive report, and I also want to thank Mr. Koncharenko, Ms. Mesencheva, and other Ukrainian colleagues for your powerful pages. Our support for Ukraine is solid as a rock. We feel and live by your bravery and look up to your determination. We also want to guarantee that Ukraine, freedom and democracy prevails. Ukraine must be supported by all means necessary. That means Ukraine shall receive all military support in order to push Russia out of their sovereign country. As Ukrainians have made Russia impotent in the battlefield, the Russian regime has started to destroy infrastructure and kill, torture and rape civilians. This careless breach of international law must be countered by feasible precautions to avoid and minimize the risk to civilians. This is a fundamental principle of the law of armed conflict. As President Zelensky already mentioned, European anti-airstrike performance in Ukraine must be reinforced, as well as European defense industries ramp up and must be continued for providing the vital weaponry for Ukraine's self-defense. Dear President, Russia behaves as a terrorist. It tries to destroy Ukraine's energy infrastructure and kills civilians. We should designate a terrorist behaving state as a terrorist state. Russia regards basic human rights and international law as weakness. We have shown and will keep on showing it. It is the other way around. The power and worth of Europe comes from our values. As already mentioned here, those responsible will be held accountable. Peace negotiations should only be started on conditions of Ukraine. I ask the Council of Europe to support the proposal to establish a tribunal for prosecuting Russian war crimes. Thank you. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you. Next in the debate, I call Mr. Percy Down from Canada. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. The Canadian delegation appreciates the opportunity to participate in these meetings, as it allows us to keep up to date on events in Europe and exchange information regarding, among other things, the war in Ukraine. It is now clear that when Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th, it was setting out to destroy the nationhood and statehood of an independent country in Europe. It did so in complete violation of international law. Canadians, like people the world over, were shocked and horrified when Russia launched its unprovoked and illegal invasion of Ukraine, particularly in light of President Putin's repeated claims that he had no such intentions. In the intervening months, Europe has experienced sights not seen in generations, and the world faces the greatest threat to the established international order since the Second World War. Canada has responded strongly to these events, both because of Canadians' belief in a rules-based international order and because, as home to the world's third largest Ukrainian population, we feel a special attachment to that country. From the mines and mills of eastern Canada to the prairies and farms of western Canada, people from Ukraine and their descendants have helped to build our country, and we greatly value their contribution. Since February, the Government of Canada has committed to deliver over $600 million in military assistance to Ukraine, ranging from helmets to heavy artillery, and continues to train Ukrainian troops to defend their homeland. Also, the government has provided hundreds of millions of dollars in humanitarian and financial assistance, both to the government of Ukraine and Ukrainians displaced by the Russian invasion. On top of this, individual Canadians and charities have made their own contributions, reflecting and strengthening the long-standing bonds between our countries. And working with our allies, Canada has imposed targeted sanctions against more than 1,400 individuals. Much has been done, and much more needs to be done. Even if this war were to end tomorrow, and sadly it will not end tomorrow, its effects will be wide-ranging and long-lasting. Large areas of Ukraine have been devastated by fighting, a continent has been thrown into turmoil, and an entire people will bear the scores of war for generations to come. Colleagues, we must all recognize that Putin is running a criminal and terrorist organization masquerading as a government. We will stand with the rest of the world in defending Ukraine. Thank you, colleagues.
Bravo. Thank you, Percy, for being here with us. Next in the debate, I call Madam Jane Stevenson from the United Kingdom. Jane, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'd like to thank Mr. Zingeris for this debate at such a dark time in our continent. The scenes we've seen over the past days, retaliatory attacks by Russia on Ukraine, have been disgusting and horrific and inhumane. While Ukraine takes victory on the battlefields, Russia retaliates in people's homes, in people's streets, on people's children, and on the people of Ukraine. It is disgraceful, and this resolution is correct that Russia must be held accountable for these horrific war crimes. We all must bear that responsibility to not let these crimes go unpunished, to monitor them, to record them. And it is always an honour to stand in this chamber with our Ukrainian colleagues, and we've heard some harrowing evidence of the atrocities that have been committed and that I'm sure will continue to be committed until we stop Russia. Russia cannot win this war. It would be at best a Pyrrhic victory, because if the past months have shown us anything, it is the bravery, the determination, and the lion-heartedness of the Ukrainian people. Even if Russia were to occupy Ukraine, that victory would surely be temporary. It would result in decades of unrest, disobedience, and it cannot be allowed to happen. The war must end quickly, and all of us in this place can urge our governments to help Ukraine. They need weapons, as we've heard repeatedly. I was really delighted that our Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, announced this morning the United Kingdom will be sending more medium-range air-to-air missile defence systems to Ukraine. I'm delighted that German air defence arrived yesterday. I hope this will be the first of a lot more air defences that is sent there. If your country has any weapons, please urge your governments. Ukraine needs them now. We cannot delay. This war needs to end as quickly as possible so we save as many civilian lives as possible. I want to stand shoulder to shoulder with my friends in Ukraine. I want to reiterate the commitment of the United Kingdom, that of our past Prime Minister and that of our new Prime Minister. And I will end with her words: Ukraine can win, Ukraine must win, and Ukraine will win. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Jane. Next in the debate, I call Mr. Domagoj Hadjukovic. You have the floor from Croatia. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear colleagues, first of all, let me thank Mr. Zingeris for this report. I hope this is the last report that we will debate about Russian aggression on Ukraine while it is still lasting. In other words, I hope that the war will be over soon. I too have visited Ukraine this summer in the framework of a parliamentary platform, United for Ukraine. We are parliamentarians from across the European and world countries supporting Ukraine and lobbying for Ukraine. So I do urge you colleagues who wish to join us, either contact me or find us on Twitter. We have national coordinators in almost all European countries. But colleagues, what I've seen around Kiev, in Makariv, in Andriiv, in Bucha, in Irpin, and these are only from the first stages of the war, was atrocious. We are really talking about most heinous crimes against humanity. We are talking about genocide. We are talking about senseless loss of life. And this, dear colleagues, does deserve and must have legal prosecution and consequences for those responsible. From the top, from those who issued orders to those who executed them. But also I think this is an important time to think about the future as well. Rebuilding of Ukraine after the war. Unfortunately, we cannot compensate for the lives lost, but the buildings and infrastructure must be rebuilt. And the territories currently occupied must be returned to Ukraine, either by military or peaceful means. And I do advocate for peaceful means to avoid loss of life, but unfortunately from today's perspective, that seems impossible. But regardless by which means they return to Ukraine, let us be clear on one point. Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporozhye, Kherson, Crimea are Ukraine. And no sham referendums, no theatrical exhibitions will change that. And until these parts are back into Ukraine, the war will not be over. So, I wish to reiterate my support and the support of Croatian people who can really empathize with Ukrainians, because we went through homeland war, unfortunately very similar to that what they're going through now, to our support and wish that this war will be over soon. And furthermore, let me reiterate the need to legally prosecute all the perpetrators of these heinous crimes in Ukraine. Slava Ukraini, Mir Ukraini, Svoboda Ukraini.
Thank you. Next in the debate, I call Mr. Sergei Sobolia from Ukraine. Sergei, you have the floor.
We have already fulfilled all our tasks for today. Is the phrase of bloody dictator Putin, which he announced the same day when the biggest missile attack destroyed hospitals, energy system in 12 biggest cities of Ukraine. So it was his reaction when he knew that any one military object was destroyed, but he fulfilled all his tasks. Second, if you can imagine what is now on occupied territories, where tortures, each day tortures, by secret services of Russia against the civilians. And the name of these organizations are filtration camps. where thousands and thousands of our citizens are in horrible conditions. Concentration camps, it's for military, where also tortures is a main principle. Very interesting thing, who have possibility to watch Nazi concentration camps in Poland or in other countries. Russia opened new item in this sphere. It's so-called mobile crematorium, in order to hide all their war crimes. What is this? We try to discuss it's terrorist regime or not, it's fascist regime. We are not understand still this. We're not the second, but not the first person in the Russian Federation, Medvedev, former president, declare that our main item to exclude Ukrainian nation. What is this? After this will be other nations. What we are waiting for? I think that this excellent resolution is the best way for peace. Because we can find here everything that we try in a shame way not to put in our previous resolutions. I think that we need to support this resolution for everything, for future peace, to fulfill the main task that President Macron declared today, to free all territories of Ukraine to the 1991, as it was to international law. Thank you for your support. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Sergei. Now I call in a debate Madam Yulia Ovniskova from Ukraine as well. Yulia, you have the floor.
Dear President, dear Assembly, at first, thank you very much for this historical and incredible, important report, dear Mr. Zingeris. Dear colleagues, in the eyes of the whole world, this brutal, unprovocated, illegal, full-scale war of aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukrainian state, against Ukrainian nation, has been escalated. Russia detonated the world order, global security, and severely violated international law, all norms, all of the democratic civilization. And the war is really genocide against Ukraine nation, against Ukraine state, but it's also numerous ecocide against nature and crime against environmental in the whole Europe. And it's serious food security risk for the global world. Today, I want to focus on the environmental consequences of this invasion, because every of us have own rights, basic rights for the healthy environment, and every of us think about our future and, of course, about the future of our children. So human activists fighting in Ukrainian and the gross violation of human rights for the healthy environmental of Ukrainian and Europeans. But today Russia has been threatened and blackmailing the world with a nuclear catastrophe. They have cynically demonstrated their violations of all the possible norms. They are proud of crossing all the red lines and all destruction they did. The majority of natural resources are damaged and destroyed in our country. We fixed more than 2,000 accidents in environment. We have more than 2.9 million hectares destroyed this Emerald Network territory. Under the occupation, more than 40% of natural protected area. And Russian attacks continue to the infrastructure, to the water supply system and energy system. And it's really being the polluted and numerous toxic and dangerous substance in the waters, but it's really played on the all water global water system. And of course, I want to add about these animals. It's the silent witness of this war. And for us, and for all the world, thank you for this, your support. It's symbols of our strength for our life. It's symbols of humanity of our people. And just some words about one of the symbols, it's the dog's name, it's crime. On Ukrainian Crimea, some years ago, this brought from the Crimea, who is only one family member left of the shelling of his house in the residence district in Dnipro, sitting crying lost. Crime is the evidence and symbol of the tragedy of our country. I ask every of our member states to support this resolution and support us for fighting for our independence, our lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yulia. Next in the debate, I call Mr. Givi Mikanadze from Georgia. Givi, you have the floor.
Dear Mr. President, the whole of the civilized world is witnessing Russia's unprovoked and unjustified military aggression against Ukraine. Since the very first day, Georgia has been condemning Russia's military aggression on Ukraine and has been providing its firm support to Ukraine and to the Ukrainian people, expressed through political support and humanitarian aid. Georgia is a leader among 191 countries per capita in the provision of humanitarian aid to Ukraine. We have accommodated 32,000 refugees from Ukraine who were provided with free accommodation, meals and all necessary assistance. From a political point of view, Georgia was a co-sponsor of the UN Security Council resolution, as was among 141 countries that adopted the UN resolution reaffirming Ukraine's sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity. Additionally, Georgia was one of 38 signatory countries that applied to the International Criminal Court in The Hague to investigate war crimes committed in Ukraine during Russia's unlawful invasion. Georgia supported the suspension of the membership and later expulsion of the Russian Federation from the membership of the Council of Europe. I would also like to add that in no way will Georgia be used as a tool to bypass the sanctions. This is of primary importance for Georgia and we will follow this principle to the end. Russian aggression in Ukraine is substantially altering global security and the South Caucasus is no exception. In parallel to Russia's unlawful invasion of Ukraine, Russia has intensified the process of annexation of the occupied territories of Georgia and continues its terrible provocations on the ground. These are very worrisome and seriously complicate the situation in these occupied regions. Until this day, we in Georgia are facing so-called borderization process conducted illegally by Russian troops almost on a daily basis. I welcome that this crucial general policy debate on the consequences of the Russian Federation's aggression against Ukraine is at the center of the autumn plenary session on the pace. Also, we support the draft resolution. We see also there are some issues we think to be amended in the text. Georgia is a member of a civilized world and a true friend of Ukraine, suffered from Russia's unjustified military aggression in 2008. 20% of our territories are still occupied by Russia and Russian troops are illegally present even 40 kilometers away from the capital Tbilisi. We understand the consequences of Russia's aggression in Ukraine better than others do, and that is why I want to reiterate that Russia's continuous occupation of Georgia and Ukraine undermines European security architecture and the rules-based international order. Therefore, I call the Assembly to reaffirm unwavering support for the sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders, as well as express our full support and solidarity with the Ukrainian people. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Givi. Next in the debate, I call Mr. Alexander Meresko from Ukraine. Alexander, you have the floor.
Chair, dear friends, what can be done and should be done to help Ukraine to survive and defend itself and to stop Russian aggression? First of all, we need to recognize Russia as a terrorist state with all the consequences. Such consequences as total isolation, severance of all diplomatic, economic, political, cultural contacts. We should remember that Russia is not a state in the true sense of this word. Russia is a global, genocidal, terroristic gang, not more. Second, the best guarantee of protection of human rights is to provide Ukraine with all necessary heavy weaponry, because heavy weaponry right now saves lives of civilians in Ukraine. Third, we need to recognize genocide of Ukrainian nation. We see that Russia deliberately is targeting civilian objects and civilians. Russia's ultimate goal is to exterminate Ukrainians as a nation, and they're not hiding this goal. They're talking about this openly. Regrettably, Russian population supports genocide of Ukrainians, and we should have no illusions about that. Fourth, members of the Council of Europe should freeze and confiscate all Russian assets and property, and to give these assets to the victims of aggression. Fifth, we need to establish a special tribunal on the crime of aggression and to bring to justice all Russian war criminals, starting with Putin. Stop talking to Putin. He is a war criminal. He should be treated as a war criminal, not more. And finally, we should restore the reputation of our organization and put an end once and for all to all this policy of the so-called dialogue, which is nothing but a euphemism for the appeasement of the aggressor. All those who had been involved in the return of Russian delegation, who had been lobbying for Russia for this dialogue, should step down. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Next in the debate, I call Madam Serap Yassar from Turkey. You have the floor, Serap.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Madam and Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start by thanking the rapporteur for this extremely important report. Since the beginning of the Russian aggression back in early February, all of us have witnessed so many new challenges facing Europe and indeed the whole world. We find ourselves facing an energy crisis, a security crisis, a food crisis, and many more crises. The food crisis which we are now facing has had a profound impact on the whole world, in particular those countries which are dependent on cereal exports from Ukraine and Russia. Given that the right to food is the most important, the most fundamental and the most vital human right, the question of food security is something which must be treated as a priority. With a view to doing this, we've talked about the consequences of the blockade of the Black Sea during the last session of the Parliamentary Assembly. Since then, Turkey has stepped up its contacts with Ukraine, Russia, and the United Nations to establish a safe and sure corridor transit route for cereals. I'm delighted to remind you that the initiative on security of transport of cereals and foodstuffs since Ukrainian ports was finalized on the 22nd of July after long and difficult negotiations. Under the leadership of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Turkey has played an essential role in rolling out this initiative and creating a cereal corridor with the United Nations. Once again, we've seen the enormous importance of maintaining channels open so as to guarantee dialogue between leaders in this type of crisis. The agreement finalized in Istanbul was a major diplomatic success which has had an enormous impact on the life of millions of people suffering from famine. Since the first vessel was able to cross the Black Sea as part of the agreement, between the 1st of August and the 1st of October, more than 240 vessels have transported more than 5 million tons of agricultural produce along the cereal corridor. I would like to underline that Turkey will continue its efforts so as to guarantee sustainable peace in the region, while at the same time continuing to play its role of mediator between the two parties. Our sincere hope is that peace will be achieved without any further wait.
Next in the debate,
thank you, Sarah.
Corbyn from the United Kingdom. But I do not see him yet. So we go to the next speaker, that's Mr. Birge Thorarinsson from Iceland. Birge, you have the floor.
President, our thoughts and prayers are with those who are suffering in Ukraine. Last month I went to Kharkiv in Ukraine I brought iPads from Iceland to children from poor households to enable them to participate in online schooling because of the war. After 14 hours of traveling by train from Lviv to Kharkiv, accompanied by Maria Matseva, head of the Ukrainian delegation, I saw the war with my own eyes. I saw the devastation by the Russian invasion. Hospitals, schools, homes, kindergartens, food market, businesses, government buildings, churches, all had been destroyed. The evilness of Mr. Putin has no limits, but nor has the European solidarity. In the midst of this shocking experience, I got a smile from the children in Kharkiv when they received the iPad from Iceland. In the midst of all this, I saw hope. It is hard to imagine how it is to be an innocent child in a brutal war. Mr. President, in Kharkiv, I saw the destruction of the opera house. I saw how Russia is systematically trying to destroy Ukrainian culture. But they will never succeed because Ukrainians will never give up. Yesterday, we heard the beautiful performance of the Symphony Orchestra of Kharkiv and opera singers. They came to us. They came from the war zone to bring us joy. Despite their suffering, they brought to us the Ukrainian culture. This is truly an inspiring nation. I encourage all members of this assembly to see the war by their own eyes and bring hope to children and people of Ukraine. Resolutions passed in this assembly are important, but they are not enough in war times. Being a parliamentarian is an honor and a privilege. We all have a unique opportunity that we must use to help the people of Ukraine. We as parliamentarians from 46 countries must show the world that we are not afraid of the Russian aggression. We are not afraid of the dictator in Moscow. Let us not forget, all through history, dictators always fall, always. May God bless President Zelensky and the brave people of Ukraine and keep them safe and free.
Thank you, Birger. Next, I call in the debate Mr. Geraint Davis from the United Kingdom. Geraint, you have the floor.
Mr. President, we stand today in solidarity against Putin's grotesque escalation of missile attacks launched to the cities across the Ukraine, from Belarus, from Russia, from the Caspian Sea, from Crimea. Now, half the downpour of missiles may have been intercepted by air defences, but half, of course, hit their targets, killing civilians, taking out water, taking out heating installations to terrorise the population into submission. Ukraine urgently needs more air defences. We've already heard from President Zelensky they've only got 10% of their needs. There's a 2,500-kilometre border, and we know even in Belarus they've got rockets, missiles, drones for Iran attacking all our freedoms. Putin knows his war is illegal, as Russia, of course, was expelled from the Council of Europe for breaking rules that they'd signed up to in terms of democracy, human rights and the rule of law, and then committed an unprovoked attack on a sovereign democracy, unleashing mass killings now on civilians. He knows his referenda are also illegal in occupied areas. They're done at gunpoint. They aren't even done with the consent of the Russian people, who wouldn't vote for more land they don't need for the blood of Russian soldiers. And it's clearly farcical to suggest that that referenda somehow legitimizes the threat or use of nuclear weapons. He is losing ground, and so he's escalating into state terrorism, targeting civilians on an industrial scale in breach of the Geneva Convention. His mass call-up has backfired. Those who've been keeping their heads down in Russia are now resisting their sons being sent to their death. And hundreds of thousands are leaving Russia. And indeed, talk of a 5% income tax increase to pay for more guns isn't going down well to to pay for land Russia doesn't need. And now we have the misinformation campaign that if Putin were replaced, it would be replaced by someone even worse, which is another act of propaganda desperation. Meanwhile, China stands in support of Russia, knowing that the fall of Ukraine would trigger a green light for the invasion of Taiwan. And what's more, of course, it is rendering Russia as a dependent state on China. So vast swathes of land are now leased, of course, by China of Russian land will eventually become Russian. So we've got this farcical situation where Russia is taking over other people's territories, and over time its own territories will be taken because it's cutting itself away from the economic and political ties to the West. Ultimately, we want a return in Russia of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law and economic relations. This is the price of peace, but that price will only be won with a complete military withdrawal, with international justice pursued by this body and reconciliation. And that task will require a redoubling of all our efforts in all our countries to ensure that this brutal attack and such brutal attacks in the future never again or never ever succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Geraint.
The next speaker and our speaker will be Mr. Bernard Fournier from France. Bernard, you have the floor. Mr. President, dear colleagues, confronted with important setbacks for his army and great logistic difficulties, the Russian Federation has chosen to intensify the conflict, having recourse once again to bombing, trying to destroy strategic infrastructure, particularly energy infrastructure, and bringing about terror. I vigorously condemn these bombings, just as I condemn, obviously, the sham referenda organized to justify annexing Ukrainian territory. Ukraine's territorial integrity must be respected. I am very pleased to that end with the vote we had yesterday in the General Assembly of the United Nations, in spite of a large number of abstentions. We also are discovering in parallel crimes committed by Russian military, mass graves, which show the scale of these crimes, which must be documented and must not go unpunished. This terror strategy is also being applied by Vladimir Putin's regime in Russia. The massive mobilization decided on September 21st has caused many of the Russians concerned to flee their country. The issue of how to receive these persons and the status they should receive will rapidly become very current. We're also seeing during this mobilization campaign that it is particularly targeting minority ethnic groups. It's also unacceptable that prisoners throughout Russia be sent to fight in Ukraine. Measures limiting public freedoms are also ever more numerous. A new law is prohibiting any form of criticism of the army, which was already punished with 15 years of imprisonment. Opposition demonstrations are also being repressed. Russia is being smothered, and any form of criticism of its military operations is being rooted out, including at the highest level. I would also like to congratulate Vladimir Murza on his receiving the Václav Havel Prize. As matters progress, Russia's regime will become ever more radical, and we see now that there is an ever-present threat of recourse to nuclear weapons. This threat must be taken seriously, but we should not give in to it. We must continue to support Ukraine, who is fighting to preserve its sovereignty. We must remember this war is reminding us that peace is fragile and our values have not been acquired once and for all. So this organization needs to be ever stronger so as to meet tomorrow's challenges. Thank you. Thank you, Bernard.
And the last speaker in the debate, because then I have to interrupt the list of speakers, will be Madam Olena Komenko from Ukraine. Olena, you have the floor.
Dear Mr. President, dear Rapporteur, dear colleagues, every day brings more grave news about Russia's atrocities in Ukraine. Recently, Zaporizhzhia has become among the favorable targets of Russia's military, alongside with other cities. Other recent outrageous actions of Russian military include shooting down convoys of civilians who were trying to escape their occupied territories. Few days ago, we were shocked by video of Ukrainians being shot and thrown in a mass grave near Kupiansk. Endless list of horrors, endless records of another war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide of Ukrainians. More and more terrifying cases are being unveiled with every new liberated territory. But the most terrifying is not the fact that these acts of exterminations. Most terrifying is to understand that international legal order has become paralyzed and incapable to protect human lives. Russia brutally destroys it and enjoys impunity. With no perspective for fair justice and inevitability of the punishment, Russian political leadership continues to send deadly orders to kill innocent. Europe should stand resolute to vigorously defend human life and as the highest value. It should stay strong to defend international legal order. Political declarations and resolutions are not enough. In fact, there is no international order in place if we cannot ensure punishment for those who are undermining it. The rule breaker has to be punished with all the severity of the law. Otherwise, the impunity will become an attractive invitation for other assertive regimes to follow the line of Russia's actions to pursue their ambitions at an expense of other nations. It is prime responsibility of European nations to show that such brutal behavior in Europe shall not be tolerated and will be severely prosecuted. Because we are the host of the continent and not the hostages of one insane regime of criminals. Inevitability of punishment should be a crystal clear message for Putin and his decision makers. Now they feel themselves impune and immune because they do understand that they will almost likely escape charges under ICC procedures, but they have to be charged. Justice must prevail if we want to preserve the legal order. This has to be done through an establishment of the special tribunal on Russian political leadership for crime of aggression. Easy to prove and supplementary to ICC, this mechanism will enable to deliver swift individual sentences for Russia's top political leadership. As you all heard today, the President of Ukraine attaches high priority to the issue. This view is widely shared among Ukrainian politicians and wider society. A respective working group on tribunal has been just formed by presidential decree. Interfaction group has been formed in Verkhovna Rada. Intense activity is happening around this issue with foreign political decision makers. And I'm finishing, Mr. President. To this end, we welcome respective references in the resolutions of the PACE and its Executive Ministerial Committee, but more actions have to be taken. The process on its practical establishment has to start now to signal Russia's political leadership it is serious. Thank you, dear colleagues.
Thank you, Elena. As I said, you are the last speaker in this debate. I have to interrupt the list of speakers. The speeches of members on the speakers list who have been present during the debate but have not been able to speak may be given to the table office for publication in the official report. I remind colleagues that typewritten text can be submitted electronically if possible, no later than 4 hours after the list of speakers is interrupted. I now call Mr. Zingeris, rapporteur. You have 5 minutes to respond, Emanuelis. Emanuelis, you have to take the right microphone.
Yes, thank you.
That is not functioning. No.
It's not working.
No, the other one. Take the other one. Jasko, yes, Madam Jaskos.
I'm sorry. That was tragicomic mistake. So, from my point, all speakers, especially last Alona, starting with Maria, of course, the other representatives mention all points who are inside of the topic, all points inside of the inside of the report. So thank you for supporting. Thank you. Thank you for supporting the topics inside of the report. And I would like to say, coming from point to point, that you covered in your speeches all actually paragraphs from our report. Thank you for supporting all of them. I think Mr. Cox, this assembly actually designed like that. It was year probably 1960. Approve the Danish delegation proposal not to recognize occupation of the Baltic states. Can you imagine? And it approved with anonymous voting, 1960, by Soviet Union, means after Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Now we are facing a stage, well, first time in the history, probably Mr. Cox, we have other cases, but other examples, but first time, dear Despina, in our history, we have such unanimous support to resolution when we are facing, after Second World War, major violation against international law and international community, and actually mankind. The voting yesterday in the United Nations means mankind. The act of Russia is against all specter of issues related to mankind, including everything. Food crisis, attack against democracy, human rights, attack against sovereignty of the countries, not looking to the 4 regions. It's a terrible 4 regions by the sham artificial referendums declared Russia territory. We understand that it will be like a joke if it will be not hundreds of thousands of victims behind that. It's an unprecedented event, and we will continue. Mr. Cox, in our Political Affairs Committee, we will continue to have the report. The report will be continue in Political Affairs Committee about this issue, and we will come to the other steps reacting to the brutality of Russia if Russia will not stop. And Russia regime is officially declared here in the resolution like a terrorist regime in Russia. So from my point of view, I would like to go to the few points, especially to the Special Ad Hoc International Tribunal to prosecute the crimes aggression against Ukraine. We must be clear in our determination to ensure the comprehensive system of accountability for serious violation of international law arising of the Russian Federation aggression against Ukraine. We should have the register of the damages, let's say, international compensation mechanism, including unregistered of the damages. We would like to encourage all member states to open their legal systems for the Ukrainian victims during the war of aggression, asking to start the procedures even underway to the International Special Tribunal to make cases against Russian violators of human rights, means Russia aggression violations on the occupied territories. Bring back immediately Ukrainian citizens from becoming captive in Russia. Bring back Ukrainian citizens who they brought from occupied territories to Russia for so-called re-education. Absolutely purely Joseph Stalin type action by Russia, reminding us that Russia continue the bad habits, terrible habits of dictator Joseph Stalin. So we have here in appeal, Mr. President, dear friends, appeal to the upcoming head of states of government of the Council of Europe member states to gather for a 4th summit, put the issue of accountability of Russian Federation, increase their support to Ukraine in the top agenda of the summit, upcoming summit. The summit should dedicate enough time to the item of the Russia aggression to such an exceptional human tragedy. So resolution just will be passed by us, include everything who just mentioned by you, but we have in mind that Russia started their occupational strategies, including Georgia, Moldova, it was 2008, before was Moldova with Dnestr region, and now Ukraine. We should stop Russia, who becoming a terrorist entity against all of us, and we should praise Ukraine doing mature homeworks in human rights, even during the bombing. Thank you for all laws done, dear friends from Ukrainian delegation, from all parties in your parliament, linked to the standards of human rights of Council of Europe. You're doing that now under bombing and under terrible sound of sirens. Thank you for being mature democracy and fighting for all of us. We are ready to be until the end of victory on your side. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Mr. Rapporteur. Does the Vice Chairman of the committee, Mr. Kimmo Kiljunen, wishes to speak? That is so. You have 3 minutes, Kimmo.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I will speak on behalf of the political committee here. First of all, I would like to say thanks very much for Mr. Zingeris, the rapporteur, for this very, very important report. Earlier this morning, President Zelensky emphasized how the entire international community must play a strong role during the current aggression. This urgent debate exactly is a small but significant demonstration that the Assembly intends to keep denouncing the Russian aggression and that it will push to keep Russia accountable for its aggression. The draft resolution approved in the Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy sends a clear and straightforward messages regarding the outrageous escalations by the Russian Federation. And I stress, first, the sham referendums must be considered null and void, and with no legal or political effects. Secondly, the attempted annexation of these regions by the Russian Federation is an affront to international law and will never be recognized. Thirdly, threats of nuclear warfare are reckless, apocalyptic, and in breach of international law. Colleagues, given the unprecedented threat of the Russian aggression to the most basic values of the Council of Europe, the draft resolution also appeals to the heads of state and government of Council of Europe member states to gather for a 4th summit and put the issue of accountability of the Russian Federation high on the agenda. That's exactly what Mr. Zingeris just said, and we also support from the committee side in that way. The resolution was unanimously adopted in committee this morning. It was enriched by numerous amendments, most of which were supported unanimously. I count on all colleagues to join us in sending a clear and united message. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vice President of the Political Affairs Committee. That closes the debate. The Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy has presented a draft resolution to which 14 amendments have been tabled. I understand that the Vice Chairperson of the Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 8, 9, 6, 3, 1, 4, 2, 5 and 13 to the draft resolution, which were unanimously adopted by the committee, should be declared as agreed by the Assembly. Is that so, Mr. Kiljunen? Thank you so much. Does anybody object? I see there is an objection, and could you please explain to which amendment or amendments you object, sir?
The only amendment we object is amendment number 4.
Thank you. As there is an objection against amendment 4 to be declared adopted, it will be taken individually later. And the amendments 8, 9, 6, 3, 1, 2, 5 and 13 to the draft resolution have been agreed. Can we go to which? Page 12. I now call Mr. Dimitri Natuluka to support amendment number 10. You have 30 seconds.
Yes, dear colleagues, we have agreed with the esteemed rapporteur that we will support his sub-amendment, which rephrases amendment number 10. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nataluka. I have been informed that the rapporteur wishes to propose an oral sub-amendment. It reads as follows. In amendment number 10, replace the words that facilitates terrorism with the following words, that support external aggression and therefore share all the responsibilities of the consequences of that aggression. So that the whole amendment reads now, and that the Russian political parties that have previously voted for illegal decisions encroaching on the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine and other countries shall be treated and recognized as groups and entities that support external aggression and therefore shall all the responsible and therefore share all responsibilities of the consequences of that aggression. In my opinion, this sub-amendment is in order under our rules. However, if 10 or more amendments object the sub-amendment being debated, I do not see that. There's fewer than 10 minutes to object, so I call the rapporteur to support his oral sub-amendment. You have the floor, Mr. Singers.
We have very fruitful discussion, thank you, and we achieve an agreement with that. So I think it will be fruitful to describe the political system who supported this terrible aggression, means political system in Russia, who used for support of aggression responsible for all consequences. Absolutely, well, it's not only members of parliament, but all political system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singers. Does anyone who wishes to speak against the oral sub-amendment? I do not see any. What is the opinion of the mover of the main amendment? We already heard Mr. Nataluka is in favor of it. The committee is obviously in favor. So I will now put the oral sub-amendment to the vote. The vote is open.
You can close it now.
The vote is closed. I call for the results to be displayed. The oral sub-amendment is adopted. We will now consider the main amendment as amended. Does anybody wish to speak against the amendment as amended? I do not see any. The committee is obviously in favor. I shall now put amendment number 10 as amended to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. May I see the results to be displayed? The amendment is adopted. Then we move further, and I understand that Mr. Dimitri Nataluka wishes to withdraw Amendment 11 to allow for a conciliation oral amendment proposed by the rapporteur.
Sorry, yeah. Dear Chair, you're absolutely right. I would like to withdraw the sub-amendment, the amendment number 11, and instead encourage to support the oral sub-amendment instead of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nataluka. Does anybody else wish to propose? No. We have the original to propose this amendment. That's not the case. Does anybody wish?
Go to page 18 now. It's been withdrawn.
This has been withdrawn. Thank you very much. The rapporteur has presented an oral amendment proposed by the committee. The oral amendment reads as follows. At the end of paragraph 4, add the following words. In this regard, the Assembly should look into the issue of the seat of the Russian Federation in the United Nations Security Council. The President may accept an oral amendment on the grounds of promoting clarity, accuracy, or conciliation if there is no opposition from 10 or more members to be debated. In my opinion, the oral amendment meets the criteria of Rule 34.7.a. Is there any opposition the amendment to be debated? I do not see. Therefore, I call the rapporteur to support the oral amendment. Emanuelis, you have 30 seconds.
I'm in favor, and thank you for agreement among us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emanuelis. Does anybody wish to speak against the oral amendment? I do not see. The committee is obviously in favor. I now shall put the oral amendment to the vote. The vote is open.
And then after 9.
Vote is closed. May I call the results to be displayed? The oral amendment is adopted. I now call Madam Alberg to support amendment number 4. And you have 30 seconds, Boriana.
Dear colleagues, Mr. Saakashvili is Ukrainian citizen. He is Ukrainian official and his opponent to Putin. I think it's very important that he should be mentioned in this context, and he and other political prisoners should be released. Please, dear colleagues, look who has signed this amendment. They're leaders of political groups, leaders of national delegation, and very active here in the assembly people. So please support this amendment.
Thank you, Boriana. Does anybody wish to speak against this amendment? Mr. Saar, you have the floor.
We have to speak against amendment number 4 and call you to reject it, because there is an oral amendment which clarifies better the text, referring to immediate release of Vladimir Kara-Murza and to the need to Mr. Saakashvili's case to be reviewed. This amendment was unfortunately not present in the committee, but this is much more coherent and responsible way to point out the both concerns. Thank you. So please reject, so we can amend it in the proper way.
Thank you, Indrek. What is the opinion of the committee on the amendment, Mr. Kiljunen?
He was obviously agreeing with the original things, but now obviously we haven't taken position on the oral statements here. So we are without opinion on that one.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I now shall put the amendment to the vote, and the vote is open. I now close the vote. Can we see the results to be displayed? The amendment is adopted.
27.
I have received an oral amendment from the rapporteur, which reads, after paragraph 9, add a new paragraph. In this respect, the Assembly wholeheartedly welcomes the passage on the 12th of October by the United Nations General Assembly by a 3/4 majority of the resolution entitled Territorial Integrity of Ukraine, Defending the Principles of the Charter of the United Nations, which recalls the obligation of states under Article 2 of the United Nations Charter to refrain from the threat of the use of force against the territorial integrity of any state, condemns the organization by the Russian Federation of illegal so-called referendums, and declares that subsequent attempted illegal annexation of these regions have no validity under international law. The President may accept an oral amendment on the grounds of promoting clarity, accuracy or conciliation, and if there is not opposition from 10 or more members to it being debated. In my opinion, the oral amendment does not...
It does meet.
What?
It does meet the criteria.
Does? In my opinion, the oral amendment does meet the criteria of Rule 34.7a and therefore can be debated.
Yes.
Is there any objection? No. And if that is the case, we will ask Mr. Zingris to support oral amendment. You have 30 seconds, sir.
That's, thank you. That is a major issue. Yesterday at night, it was urgent debate of General Assembly. Probably happens first time after Second World War, when General Assembly came to resolution about breach the Charter of United Nations, the most important paragraph number 2, means related to crucial obligation of member states.
Thank you.
From my point of view, it's extremely important to include, and we included only now for the reason that yesterday was the United Nations resolution at night. Thank you.
We have to deal with a lot of issues, so we have to continue. What is the opinion of the committee on the oral amendment, Mr. Kiljunen? The committee is unanimously in favor. I now shall put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open.
33 of this.
The vote is closed. I call for the results to be displayed. The oral amendment is adopted. I now call Madam Alexandra Ustinova to support amendment number 12. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you so much, dear colleagues. We've already mentioned this in the speech of the rapporteur and my own speech. This amendment talks about asking the states to provide necessary air defense systems together with the financial support and reconstruction for Ukraine. We're asking for the defensive weapon, which means this is the special weapon that will shoot down the missiles and the bombs that are coming to our cities every day. And after what happened on Monday, when 12 Ukrainian cities were shelled and more than 100 rockets and missiles were sent, this is critical for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak against the amendment? No. Do not see any. What is the opinion of the committee, Mr. Kiljunen?
Committee was strong majority in favor.
Okay, thank you very much. I now shall put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. I close the vote and may the results be displayed. The amendment is adopted. I now call Madam Maria Jufreva-Skuratovsky to support amendment number 7. You have 30 seconds.
Dear Chair, dear colleagues, this amendment proposes to declare the current Russian Federation regime as a terrorist regime. Please support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have been informed that the rapporteur wishes to propose an oral sub-amendment as follows. Delete the words Russian Federation a terrorist regime and replace with current Russian regime as a terrorist one. So that it reads, declare current Russian regime as a terrorist one. In my opinion, the oral sub-amendment is in order under our rules. However, if 10 or more members do object the oral sub-amendment being debated, I do not see that. So I would like to ask the rapporteur to support his oral sub-amendment. And again, you have 30 seconds, Emmanuelis.
I would like to say that after debates in Political Affairs Committee and exchanging the most important views between the people who were involved in that formulation, we achieved some clear formulation of that to declare the current regime like a terrorist one in Russia. So for that reason, I would like to say thank you for everyone who was involved in this roundtable. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuelis. What is the opinion of the mover of the main amendment? Madam Yefreva? Thank you very much. You are in favor. What is the opinion of the committee, Mr. Kiljunen?
Majority in favor as orally sub-amended.
Okay, then I now will put the oral sub-amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. May I see the results being displayed? The oral sub-amendment is adopted. We now will consider the main amendment as adopted, as amended. Does anybody want to speak against the amendment as amended? I do not see. The committee is obviously in favor, so I shall now put amendment number 7 as amended to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the results to be displayed. The amendment is adopted. I now call Mr. Dimitri Nataluka to support amendment number 14. You have 30 seconds again.
Dear Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Here again, as previously, we have agreed with the rapporteur on a joint wording, and I therefore would like to support his oral sub-amendment of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nataluka. I have been indeed informed that the rapporteur wishes to propose an oral sub-amendment as follows. In Amendment 14, replace the words that facilitate terrorism with the following words: that support external aggression and therefore share all responsibilities of the consequences of the aggression. In my opinion, the oral sub-amendment is in order under our rules. However, if there are 10 or more members to object this oral sub-amendment being debated, I do not see so. Then I would like to ask the rapporteur to support his oral sub-amendment. And again, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. It was the same like was repeated in the first case a few minutes ago. It was repeating the same formulation about the essence of Russia aggression and the essence of political system in Russia. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rapporteur. Does anybody wish to speak against the oral sub-amendment? I do not see any. We already heard the opinion of the mover of the main amendment. What is the opinion of the committee, Mr. Kiljunen?
Unanimously in favor as already sub-amended.
Thank you very much. I will now put the oral sub-amendment to the vote, and the vote is open. I close the vote, and the results are now being displayed, and the oral sub-amendment is adopted. We will now consider the main amendment as amended. And does anybody wants to speak against the amendment as amended? I do not see any. The committee is obviously in favor. I now shall put amendment number 14 as amended to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the results to be displayed, and the amendment is adopted. We will now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 15631 as amended. The vote is open. The vote is closed. The results are now displayed, and the resolution is adopted unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Congratulations to the rapporteur. This assembly will hold its next meeting, public meeting, this afternoon at 3:30 p.m. with the agenda which was approved on Monday morning. The sitting is adjourned. Sorry, colleagues. Please remain for a moment. There is a point of order by Mr. Corbyn.
Mr. President, very briefly, I'm sorry to delay people, on a point of order. In the vote on the Countering Islamophobia, Anti-Muslim Racism in Europe debate, document 15616, vote number 4596, I inadvertently did not cast my vote in favour of the document. I'd be grateful if the official report could include my strong support for this document.
Thank you very much, Mr. Corbyn. And now the sitting is adjourned. Sorry, but okay, Mr. Kolatian, but sorry, if I close the sitting, I close the sitting.
Sorry, Mr. President, I signaled, but you didn't see me, with all due respect. Also, as a point of order, to take note about the fact that on the Amendment 4 on the report that we just finished, my vote, through error of understanding of what was happening in the plenary, my real vote is abstention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have taken note of that, and now this sitting is adjourned. See you back at 3:30.